Post-Apocalyptic black technology battleship system. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Brother Xia, you're welcome. Chapter 77 Brother Xia, you're welcome. The first person Sun Zhan-Wu operated on was someone from Zhu's Pharmaceuticals. The big star's face was gloomy, and he took Sun Zhan-Wu and others to his convoy to hand over supplies. Zhu's Pharmaceuticals convoy was the largest among their group of survivors, and the others were scattered. Ordinary people. They are also following Sun Zhan-Wu and Zhu Yiman, hoping that this big star and the daughter of Zhu Pharmaceutical can mediate and change the current situation. However, it is a pity that, although the young man driving the super next to Zhu Yiman was very unhappy, and the person in charge, Zhu Yiman, also had a gloomy face, they were surprisingly cooperative, and cooperated with the military's car search, and took their big car away. Some of the things were taken away. Looking at the boxes of compressed biscuits being brought out, the smile on Sun Zhan-Wu's face grew stronger. He immediately turned his head and rushed to the soldiers behind him, saying, "Brothers, get moving. Let's collect the supplies. It's obligatory." Xia Bai, who was also following the crowd, heard someone cursing in a low voice, but no one dared to speak loudly. In fact, this kind of plundering is quite polite, and what Sun Zhan-Wu said is actually right. Although what they are doing now is not authentic, but they were here in Bingcheng prison before, and these survivors were able to survive because they were really borrowed. Without Sun Zhan-Wu's light, without these soldiers, these ordinary survivors would have been impossible to break out of the tide of corpses. Sun Zhan-Wu's men dispersed and went to collect supplies from each survivor's location. Those with cars basically had some things in their hands, and those without cars also had to search. At this time, those who had no supplies at all became without any losses. Bailan saw one, squatting in the corner. His clothes were in tatters, looking at the sad-faced survivors who dared to be angry and dare not speak, and laughed. It turns out that people like him who have no supplies and are hungry are the worst. But now he has become a person with nothing to lose. This may be the so-called anti-RQ spirit in the doomsday point, but in Xia Bai's view, Sun Zhan-Wu and his gang were simply benevolent. Since they started robbing, they could still leave some for others, let alone kill them all. After all, they were people from the military. Even if they had to change their appearance, they still left half of it mutual affection. Bailan also took a deep breath, looked at Xia Bai, and said, "What should we do, Xia?" Bai shook his head, glanced at Zhu Yiman, and took Bailan straight back to the RV and battleship. It is unlikely that Sun Zhan-Wu will move them. Their warship was located at the end of the entire convoy. By the time the gathering supplies arrived at them, the whole process was almost over. A small conflict broke out during the period. The owner of a Land Rover wanted to leave, but was unwilling to hand over the goods. The half of the supplies and the military people choked, but they were knocked down by the butt of a rifle. The soldier didn't hold back, and the owner of the Land Rover had a cut on his face and lay motionless for a long time. But in this scene, it also completely made everyone realize that this group of soldiers who were just like their patron saints, at this moment, have turned into beasts with teeth and claws. When the materials were gathered to Xia Bai's side, it was Sun Zhan-Wu who personally led the people all the way. He stood in front of Xia Bai, who was squatting behind the RV and smoking. He first glanced at the RV in front of him, smiled, and said, "Are you Brother Xia?" Xia Bai said, "Do you know me? How is it possible that I don't know you?" Sun Zhan-Wu smiled heartily and said, "Old Lin told me that I saw you when you were flying the aircraft in the sky before. Coupled with the summons from above, there may be no survivors. There are a few who are paying attention, but among us soldiers, how many of us don't know about you?" That's an obvious compliment. Xia Bai knew that he had attracted a lot of people's attention when he took off in a third-level battleship, but it was definitely not to this extent. This is not a movie. If you come up with something new, everyone will stare at you. It was so chaotic at that time, except for those nearby, and from the military headquarters, it was impossible for many people to really pay attention to Xia Bai. But Xia Bai didn't expose it. Instead, he took advantage of the situation and boasted to each other, "Ha, what I did was all bells and whistles. It's our 37th Division and Battalion Commander Sun who are more reliable. Otherwise, there are so many survivors. A few can escape, but right now you are." He paused here and did not say any more. Instead, he smiled kindly like Sun Zhan Point Bailan was standing behind him, leaning against the rear door of the RV, looking a little lazy. Inside, he could even see three boys, Hao Zhuang and Chen Xiansheng, having a heated landlord fight point. If we had placed it in the first 2 days of the apocalypse, these college students would have been extremely nervous when encountering this situation. But it is different now. Even the zombie wave has passed through. This kind of scene is nothing more than a small occasion. And the battleship is here, can be launched at any time, and its combat capability is no weaker than that of an infantry fighting vehicle, so they have nothing to worry about. Sun Zhangwu also noticed a few people playing landlord inside. He smiled and said, "Nothing, I just came to see Brother Xia." When he said this, he winked behind him, and the soldier following him brought a box of compressed biscuits and placed it in front of Xia Bai. Xia Bai was stunned for a moment. And Sun Zhanwu smiled and said, "A little thought. Brother Xia, you're welcome. This may be called differential treatment point." But at this moment, the other survivors gathered around were in an uproar in this motorcade. The first thing that attracts attention is Zhu Yiman's team, and the second thing that attracts attention is Xia Bai's large RV, although most people don't know that Xia Bai's RV is the previous one. Battleship. Some people didn't even notice Xia Bai's battleship appeared, but the vigorous momentum of this RV breaking through the zombie hordes and merging into the convoy was seen by many people. This RV, which is more powerful than an armored vehicle, has already attracted the attention of many people, especially Xia Bai's rejection of Zhu Yiman's request to buy a car, which made them the focus of attention. Therefore, when Sun Zhanwu came over, many survivors gathered around him, and even Zhu Yiman Mandu stood in the distance, intending to see what confidence Xia Bai had, and how much supplies he had to hand over. Human psychology is always like this. When you are miserable, you always hope that others will be worse than yourself, so you will feel better psychologically for no reason. However, this group of people who came with the mentality of watching a show never expected that Sun Zhanwu came not to collect supplies from Xia Bai, but to give supplies to Xia Bai. What's going on with his grandma? Everyone is confused. Xia Bai smiled, turned to look at Bailan, and said, "Go and get 2 Nanjings for Battalion Commander Sunday brothers. Who like this book? Don't forget to bookmark it. Chapter 77. Let's have a shot." Sun Zhanwu held 2 Nanjings in his hand and smiled brightly. Brother Xia is indeed Brother Xia. Every time he makes a move, it will be like a stick of cigarettes. There are so many survivors, but they don't have this skill. He paused and then said, "Actually, I have another thing to do when I come here." Brother Xia, what are your plans for the future? This guy turned out to want Xia Bai to join his gang. Xia Bai did not respond immediately, but said, "What are Battalion Commander Sun's plans?" Sun Zhanwu did not shy away and said, "There is a grain depot in Shuanfeng town ahead. It is not big, but it should have a lot of things. When we get there, Laolin and the others take away the 2 carts of grain and these survivors. We will not leave, or take root near there, or find another place to stay with fewer zombies." Is Brother Xia interested in joining us? Granary. Xia Bai didn't like Sun Zhanwu's invitation, but the granary. Xia Bai actually thought about robbing the granary before, but most of the granaries he could find were far away from Bingcheng. Even if he found them, he still didn't know what was there. There was no food, and it was very possible that the military had moved it away first. Therefore, robbing the granary would probably be a thankless task. Moreover, Xia Bai's own transport capacity was limited, and he had not yet searched for supplies in the ice city of high efficiency. However, now that he is here, if he wants to find a place to settle down, it will definitely be very advantageous to have a batch of food in his hands. Xia Bai pondered for a moment and said, "I will give you an answer when we get to Shuanfeng town." Sun Zhanwu glanced at Xia Bai and seemed to understand what Xia Bai meant. He smiled and said politely, "Well, let's talk about it later. We will be the ones doing the guard duty today. You guys can have a good rest here." Xia Bai nodded and said, "Thank you. By the way, I have one more thing. Do you have any extra gasoline? Diesel is fine too, son. Zhang was vicious to others, but he was surprisingly polite to Xia Bai. He smiled bitterly and said, we are no longer wealthy here. This road deviates from the main road and is in the wilderness. Let's wait until we get to Shuangfeng town ahead. At that moment, Sun Zhangwu left with his people. He collected quite a lot of supplies from the survivors, almost piling up into a hill. Of course, most of the supplies came from Zhu Yiman's convoy. Even in the apocalypse, the polarized situation is still very obvious. People who have materials often have a lot of materials in their hands, while the poor are poor in a mess. But before Sun Zhangwu and the others had gone far, someone shouted, why can you not hand over supplies? This sentence was shouted at Xia Bai, but in fact it was also meant for Sun Zhangwu and the others who had walked away. This group of survivors did not dare to speak out when Sun Zhangwu was around. Now that they are gone, this group of people can shout and speak out. A group of people even came up with a clamor and wanted to rob Xia Bai. Xia Bai was also very calm. He took out a loudspeaker from the back of the car, and while smoking a cigarette, he said calmly, if you want to rob me, you can, but you have to think about it carefully. Battalion Commander Sun just now, and I'm a brother-in-law, but something was snatched from me, and before I could even warm myself up, I was beaten to death. This sentence made many people stop in their tracks. Sun Zhangwu, who hadn't gone far over there, also coughed dryly and said, this guy's really good at pulling tiger skins. On the other side, the young man on Zhu Yiman's side was angry for a while and said, why? Sun Zhangwu's grandson didn't even give face to our Zhu group, but instead he and this group of people came out of nowhere in the countryside. The Rodeer survivors who came here called us brothers. Is he blind? Zhu Yiman beside him shook his head and said, I'm afraid Xia Bai and the others are not that simple. The young man gritted his teeth and said, then Xia Bai, he's so angry. I just don't have anyone in my hands. If there is someone, what do you want? If there are people, Zhu Yiman said, don't you understand? We are the ones who have people above us. Sun Zhangwu doesn't care, because he doesn't want to work with the military at all. Then he and Xia Bai, the crowd must be polite, because they are afraid of something close at hand. Xia Bai and others are probably veterans or international mercenaries. They are extremely powerful, so even Sun Zhangwu has to be polite. You, even if there are people, this is not someone you can bully with just a breath of bad breath. Please, be honest with me. On the other side, Xia Bai clapped his hands and stood up, holding a loudspeaker like an old man selling vegetables in a vegetable market, shouting, I collect oil here, diesel and gasoline are all available, the price is fair. If you want to find when I buy or sell, come and knock on my driver's window. With that said, Xia Bai stood up directly, went back to the RV, lazily handed the parameters of the solar cells and the battleship's electromagnetic shield to Hao Zhuang, and asked him to use the battleship's computer for verification point. At this time, Bailan said, what should we do? Do we want to form an alliance with Sun Zhangwu and the others? Xia Bai shook his head and said, what I mean is, since we know there is a granary over there in Shuangfeng, why not rob a cart of grain first, and the rest? What do you think? Bai Lan hesitated for a moment and said, I don't think Sun Zhangwu and the others are good people. And when Xia Bai heard this, he understood and said with a smile, I understand. Let's continue to work alone. This is also my idea. With the scale of our current battleship, we can find a way out wherever we go. There is no need to get involved with others. It's better to find a place to develop honestly. When Xia Bai said this, Bailan, Hao Zhuang and others were slightly relieved. Obviously, they all felt that Sun Zhangwu was not an easy person to get along with. Xia Bai didn't say anything more. After pushing the matter out of the way, he went to the driver's seat in front. To rest. He used a partition to separate the driver's seat from the inside of the RV. He waited for a while to see if there was anyone selling fuel. In fact, Xia Bai's fuel was enough for now, but after all, supplies were well prepared. But unfortunately, he waited until all the survivors around him dispersed, and no one came up to sell gasoline. He seemed to fall asleep for a while, but he was awakened by a sound after a while. Someone knocked him lightly car window point. When Xia Bai opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a field of white flowers. It was a woman dressed in rags like a beggar's uniform. She had a hot body, but was extremely beautiful. Although her face was dirty, she was also very beautiful. At this moment, she was coming up and pressing a pair of Ds on Xia Bai's car window with her chest, rubbing it up and down. This guy was also ogling Xia Bai while rubbing her. She could hear her seductive voice through the window. "Brother, let's have a sex. Thank you for listening to the cold wind. I will add more tonight. Point then. Continue to ask for favorites, recommendation votes, and all kinds of support during the new book period. I hope you can support me, and thank you for herbal tea." Chapter 78 Heading to the Granary. Xia Bai opened his mouth. To be honest, the white flowers made Xia Bai energetic. Xia Bai glanced at the closed partition behind him, and a rare thought came to his mind. He also glanced at the time. It was just past 12 o'clock. Maybe he just woke up and turned his head, but the girl had already started to lick Xia Bai's car window with a small scarlet tongue. Xia Bai was startled and quickly rolled down the window. "Sister, my car was splashed with a whole load of blood today. Although it was wiped, it was not disinfected. I can't guarantee there is any virus." The woman's face turned pale instantly. This girl is too stunned. Xia Bai was also speechless for a while, and the little provocative atmosphere just now disappeared in an instant. Xia Bai, the girl, the two looked at each other in silence for a moment, and the girl bent over and retched. Xia Bai said, "Theoretically, if you don't have any oral ulcers, you shouldn't be infected. Of course, the intensity of this virus is relatively high, so, just pretend that I didn't say anything." The embarrassment lasted for about 3 minutes. After etching, the girl turned away and disappeared into the vast night in the blink of an eye. Xia Bai could only exhale and raise the window again. He stared at the crescent moon in the sky for a while, then closed his eyes slightly and fell asleep. When Xia Bai woke up again, it was already after 6 o'clock. In November in the 3 eastern provinces, the sky was not too bright after 6 o'clock. If it were around December, this time would be as dark as the night. Baolan and the others woke up early. Xia Bai opened the partition and saw Baolan challenging half a bottle of water to wash her hair. Xia Bai was stunned for a moment before she remembered that she had just buried this girl's hair yesterday and hadn't washed her hair for a long time. In fact, Baolan is the steward of supplies in the entire RV. She clearly remembers what and how much supplies are in the vehicle. She and Yang Xin are responsible for cooking every day, but Baolan herself is responsible for the entire battleship. The most frugal people are not willing to use anything. Baolan, who seemed to have noticed Xia Bai's gaze, raised her head slightly and looked at Xia Bai with her cold eyes expressionlessly. But at this time, Hao Zhuang over there came over. He said, "Boss, I did some math last night. If I want to use that kind of solar cell to power the electromagnetic shield of the battleship and maintain the shield, it is always on. At least 12 of that kind of solar cells need to exist at the same time to ensure the use of the electromagnetic shield of the battleship." I climbed up on the roof of the car this morning and took a look. The area should be enough, but this kind of I have never heard of solar cells with a high photoelectric conversion rate. Therefore, even if it can be done with 12 in theory, it is impossible for us to get high-end products of this level. In fact, there are no such things on the Earth. Solar panels with this light point conversion rate, 12. Xia Bai was surprised. This was quite different from what he had estimated. But Xia Bai also knew that this was probably because he had made a mistake. He still knew what level he was at. However, 12 such solar cells means 3,600 energy points. His grandma's is more expensive than upgrading from a second level battleship to a third level battleship. But Xia Bai also understood that the upgrade of the battleship was only the shell and basic module facilities. To really make the battleship powerful, the upgrade of the entire internal system was also necessary. The electromagnetic shield must be functional, the medical bay must be upgraded, many used weapons need to be replenished, and the battleship's energy problem also requires the production of a large amount of primary energy bodies. In the next period of time, the matter of upgrading to level 4 will probably slow down. Xia Bai must first focus on improving the hardware issues so that the battleship can truly possess the combat effectiveness of a battleship. Otherwise, even if he blindly upgrades to level 4, the battleship, if it can't be turned on, it's just a waste of time to upgrade. Therefore, Xia Bai was not in a hurry. He had not yet fully developed the functions of level 3, so why should he rush to level 4? His current plan is to follow Sun Zanwu and the others to the granary, to get a batch of supplies, then find a place to settle down a little far away from the ice city, and overwinter while crazily accumulating energy points. As for this place, Xia Bai actually had some thoughts in his mind. He was not fooling around in his previous life. Although he spent most of his time running around, he still knew a few places where there were few zombies and plenty of supplies, and it was relatively safe. Large-scale material gathering places such as granaries are places where large survivor forces or the military can reach out. Xia Bai did not dare to touch them in his previous life. Just in the area around Ice City, he knew 2 places where he could settle down. He wanted to arm himself and the battleships to the teeth before the arrival of spring. His original plan was to kill zombies outside the Ice City prison to obtain energy points, but now, the situation has obviously not kept up with the changes at the end of the night. The ultimate neuronal adrenal hormone has been manufactured, and the secondary energy source is still nearly 5 hours away from completion. Xia Bai, who has 2 manufacturing facility modules, can create items at a speed that is doubled. He can craft items into lines. The secondary biological enhancement injection is a red injection. The red color is a bit weird, but this thing can temporarily allow ordinary people to have the combat power of the awakened person. Although it has side effects compared with alien viruses, but there are so many good things. Xia Bai put this thing away and got out of the car overnight. A lot of sporadic zombies appeared around their location. They didn't know where they came from. They seemed to be swaying and patrolling because they smelled human breath while approaching in this direction. And once they approach a certain distance, when the strong sense of smell of these zombies is enough to determine the direction of humans, they will run towards this direction crazily. But their number is not large, and without exception he was shot dead by Sun Zanwu's soldiers on the outside. Every time the military opened fire and the sound of gunfire rang out, the hearts of many people in the camp trembled. And here, Xia Bai just got out of the car and felt several burning eyes. Those belonged to other survivors. All their supplies were taken away, but nothing was taken away from Xia Bai. Instead, he and Sun Zanwu had a courtesy exchange. Of course, these people were a little unhappy, especially after knowing that Sun Zanwu did not intend to return to the army. These survivors even developed a dare to be deceived, but they did not dare to say anything. They could only intimidate Xia Bai with their eyes here, and if not, Sun Zanwu's people are here, and they even want to steal Xia Bai's heart. However, some people seem to have recognized Xia Bai and his battleship, and are hiding far away. Apart from this, there are also very safe people. People who are satisfied with the status quo, stay in their cars. As long as they can survive, they have no requirements or competition for other things. Xia Bai originally wanted to come down and talk to Lin Jiangan, but before he took 2 steps, he heard Sun Zanwu announcing that he was about to set off, so he could only return to his avian battleship, follow the convoy, and went in the direction of the granary in Shuangfeng Town Point. But Xia Bai estimated that a month had passed since the end, and 80% of the area had already been occupied by survivors. Dear book lovers, please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Please support me in any way. There are 2 more chapters in the evening, and there will be more chapters with 10,000 rewards. Chapter 79, The Land of Dead Silence. Facts have proved that Xia Bai was really wrong this time. A train overturned in Shuangfeng Town and rushed down from the track. It penetrated half of Shuangfeng Town like a sword, collapsing countless buildings. The zombies on the train plus the zombies in the town. The small urban area is almost full of these shaking, terrifying creatures. Even if they knew there was a granary here, ordinary survivors would not dare to come to this kind of place. Sun Zanwu stopped first and stood on the roof of the car to look into the distance with a telescope. Xia Bai, who was behind, had much less trouble. Although the radar system of his warship was still very low level, the various external observation systems were quite powerful. He could use the external camera to find the right angle and take the situation on the side is extremely clearly displayed in the form of a holographic screen, and the stereoscopic 3-dimensional mode can even be switched. Xia Bai took a quick look and found that the granary was located in the north of Shuangfeng town, a certain distance from the city, and just in the opposite direction of the train. Judging from the image, there seemed to be no zombies there, and the granary here, the scale was smaller than Xia Bai imagined. There were only 3 side-by-side room-style warehouses. There was a small bungalow on the other side, which seemed to be the residence of the caretaker. There were even a few half-trucks parked beside it. This made it even more confusing. People are sure that this granary should be in a state that has not been raided by any one point. If Xia Bai came by himself, it would be difficult to determine whether there was food here, but the military asked Sun Zanwu and the others to come here, which was obviously certain. Theoretically, there was food here. As long as these 3 warehouses are full, even if a car is moved, as long as they are stored properly, you will not have to worry about food and drink for half a year. Xia Bai looked at the granary over there and felt a little excited. Hao Zhuang and the others poked their heads out behind Xia Bai, looking at the granary in the picture, their eyes shining brightly. Bailan was a little distracted and murmured, "If we can get 2 carts of food, we can find a place deep in the mountains and wild forests for more than half a year." Xia Bai was still very calm. There were so many zombies in Shuangfeng town over there. If they were alone, he might not be willing to take the risk, even though the food was first. But for now, he still wanted to wait for Sun Zanwu's decision. Sun Zanwu did not hesitate for too long, and without consulting the survivors behind him, he used his 2 infantry tanks to open the way, slowed down and made a circle, and headed towards the granary from the outside of Shuangfeng town. Xia Bai did not hesitate, and followed directly behind the military. The other survivors were a little hesitant. After all, they all knew that the food had nothing to do with them. But after the military passed by, they didn't dare to stay here by themselves, and they didn't know which car owner moved it first. And soon, the convoy of survivors followed in large numbers, and Zhu Yiman's car was also among them. Most people in Shuangfeng town had seen the situation. At this time, everyone seemed cautious, driving at a low speed, and did not dare to make any loud noises. Those sitting on the roof of other people's cars were even more frightened. However, the journey was uneventful and the zombies in the town over there were not disturbed. The 2 infantry fighting vehicles stopped first. Sun Zanwu got out of the vehicle with his men. When he turned around, he saw Xia Bai getting off the vehicle almost at the same time. He left Chen Shai and Cheng and the others in the caboose and came down with Bailan and Hao Zhuang. Lin Zhonggan also followed Sun Zanwu. The 2 soldiers looked towards Xia Bai almost at the same time. Their eyes met, and they nodded to each other without making a sound. Then, Sun Zanwu led people to search that place first. The short bungalow. If they want to transport these 3 granaries, they must first confirm the safety of the surrounding situation. Otherwise 1 or 2 zombies will run out during the transport process, which will be unbearable to anyone. Xia Bai went straight to the 3 cars over there. They were all old models. 2 of them had their doors locked. One of them drove out for a short distance. The front windshield of the driver's seat was blocked. The glass was all broken. The hood was almost stained red with blood. The driver was missing, but the car keys were still in the car. Probably the man left the car out of necessity and had no chance to remove the car keys. This was an advantage for Xia Bai and the others. Xia Bai knew that many of the survivors who did not have cars were thinking about the cars here. He pressed Hao Zhuang onto the still bloody driver's seat and said, "Don't give it to anyone. If there are special circumstances, just open fire. Has the silencer been installed?" Hao Zhuang nodded and said with a look of resentment, "You asked me to come with you. I thought you were attracted by my big muscles and wanted me to help you carry food." Xia Bai smiled and shook his head, saying, "Be careful. This is not a place for joking." On the other side, Sun Zanwu also came out with his people. They obviously did not find any living or living dead in the bungalow. Instead, they found a series of keys and went straight to the nearest granary. Xia Bai and Bailan followed closely behind them. The entire granary was deathly quiet, and there wasn't even a zombie. On the other side, the survivors' convoy also drove by. As Xia Bai expected, many survivors without cars rushed to the metered road. Zuyuman also got out of the car, but she didn't care much about it. She just squinted at the granary not far away. She didn't know if it was a visual error. She always felt that the top of the right side of the building seemed to be there. There is a gap point on the other side. Sun Zanwu and the others had arrived in front of the central warehouse. The soldier holding the key went to open the door. The door was a little tight. The soldier used a little force to open the door. However, the moment the door was opened, from the ground at the door, a skinny and bloody hand suddenly stretched out, but it was extremely powerful. It directly grabbed the soldier's ankle and pulled it. He was caught off guard and forcefully pulled the soldier into the granary. The door clicked. There was a faint sound, and a moment later, a medium-sized scream came from inside. The soldier never expected that there would be zombies waiting for him in what was supposed to be a fully enclosed room. Others did not expect that the crowd dispersed in a large circle, and everyone headed by Sun Zanwu raised their guns, and under the gaze of everyone, the door was quickly pushed open from the inside out. And accompanied by a permeating and unpleasant friction sound from the slightly rusty metal door, or thing came from climbing out from inside. It was a zombie. The lower body had disappeared, half of the bloody spine was exposed, and the internal organs had long since disappeared, but it was still crawling on the ground toward living people like Sun Zanwu. However, at this moment, a burst of exclamation suddenly broke out among the survivors on the other side. I'm a handicapped person. It takes at least 2 hours to write a chapter. I'm sorry for being so late. Congratulations to Ting Han Fenglian for becoming the host of this book, and thank you all for your continued support. Keep asking for favorites, recommendation votes, and all kinds of support. Finally, thank you King Chen Chiangsing. This update is also being worked on. Judging from the current situation, it may be very late. You can watch it again tomorrow. Thank you again for your rewards, votes, collections, and comments. Herbal tea. Although I write slowly, I will do my best to give back everyone's support. Chapter 80 Hunting Creatures. Xia Bai turned around like lightning and saw among the survivors behind him a terrifying creature about 2 meters long clinging to the roof of a jetta point. That thing looked like a giant cat with a bloody skin similar to that of a licker, with blood vessels and even some organs exposed, but its head still had a somewhat human appearance, with the eyes are symmetrical to each other, the nose is 2 black holes, and its mouth is extremely huge, grinning all the way to the base of its ears. There are long and dense fangs growing inside. Its limbs are more like reptiles, and its hands are like the sharp claws, clung to the roof of the car and easily tore open the iron sheet on the roof of the jetta. The completely frightened survivors inside were pulled out alive, as if they were carrying chickens, and were torn in the middle on the spot. Disemboweled the survivor alive, tore out all the entrails of the survivor, and stuffed them into his mouth. The unlucky survivor was still struggling and howling miserably, but with this degree of fatal injuries, his body in an instant, there was only unconscious twitching, and thick plasma mixed with organ fragments spurted out of his mouth. That's an extreme mutant. Different from zombies. Extreme mutants may have similarities, but most of them are different. The appearance and behavior patterns of these things are closely related to the environment in which they live, and the attacks and encounters they receive. Therefore, their attack patterns, behavioral capabilities and killing capabilities are often difficult to predict and speculate. Xia Bai glanced at the slowly crawling half-zombie in front of the warehouse door, and finally realized how such a half-zombie became like this on the other side, facing the extreme mutant that suddenly appeared. The military members who stayed behind immediately opened fire. The monster's body strength was obviously not as strong as the one Xia Bai had seen before on the highway out of Bingcheng. It was powerful. When the bullet hit its body, it exploded with streaks of blood. The thing immediately let out a wild howl, but compared with the strength of its weaker body, its movement speed was incredibly fast. When it ran, it seemed as if it was a black shadow, killing everyone among the survivors, and screams one after another. The survivors whose bodies were torn into pieces, and whose internal organs were hollowed out died, and within a short period of time, they roared back to life again, and attacked the living people closest to them. As for the granary, the door has been pushed open. The inside of this warehouse is a hellish scene. About half of the grain stored in it has been stained red with blood. On top of these red grains, there are nearly 20 more grains. A zombie with its lower body ripped off almost exactly like the previous zombie, howling, climbing, dragging its exposed spine and half of its body towards the outside. The unlucky warrior just now also stood up unsteadily, roaring and rushing towards this side point from this position. It can be clearly seen that there is a huge gap in the top dome of the granary. Obviously, this is the nest of the extreme mutant pointed through all the things it hunted here, and because of this, there was only blood outside but not a single person or even a zombie point at this moment, as the granary door was opened. It was like opening Pandora's box, and these zombies, that were used as food rations by the extreme mutants swarmed out, and attacked these real living people. Sun Zanwu and others also opened fire immediately. While firing, they moved forward to greet them, trying to close the granary door, lock the zombies back into the granary, and then turn to deal with the extreme mutants over their point. And in just a moment, the extreme mutant had already pounced on top of an infantry tank. Its body was covered in blood and flesh, but it landed on the top of the infantry tank, slapping it wildly with its huge claws, scratching the outer armor of the infantry fighting vehicle, although it could not easily tear the armor of the infantry fighting vehicle. During the shaking, the entire infantry fighting vehicle was about to be overturned by it. The survivors were retreating with huffs and puffs. Xia Bai took a look and said, "Battle Commander Sun, leave this to me, and you can handle the situation on your side. In any case, if this extreme mutant is allowed to continue to rage, no one will be able to transport food from here. Although the central granary has become a corpse nest, there may be food in the other two. Moreover, with the military here, isn't this an opportunity to hunt down this extreme mutant and grab 100 energy points in one go?" Xia Bai lacks everything now, but of course the most lacking thing is energy points. This kind of thing is enough. Impossible. He took a deep breath, picked up the walkie-talkie, and said, "Call Chen Shai and Sheng, I need help." The battleship responded immediately. And here, Xia Bai and Bailan also took action immediately. On the other side, the infantry fighting vehicle was overturned by the extreme mutant with a loud noise. The extreme mutant was lying behind another survivor's vehicle, frantically tearing apart an unlucky person. Egg body. At this moment, Xia Bai opened fire from the other side. He held his favorite M4 and fired from a position of about 10 meters. In an instant, he successfully attracted the attention of the extreme mutant. The monster immediately let out a howl and jumped from the spot like a cannonball and directly killed Xia Bai, who was here. However, this time, Chen Shai and Sheng drove his AV and rushed towards a diagonal ground, knocking the monster and the car away together. It was then that the monster came out and was hit in midair. His body was tilted. It flew out diagonally and hit the ground heavily on the other side. At the same moment, Li Jingjiang, who had already leaned half of his body out of the skylight, lowered the muzzle of the rocket launcher on his shoulder, and in an instant, a shot was fired directly. At such a close distance, the extreme mutant was hit instantly and was engulfed in flames and thick smoke amidst an earth-shattering howl. But it was still not dead. Within a moment, it struggled and rushed out of the flames. Half of its body was blown to pieces. It instinctively rushed in the other direction, but was shot by Bailan, who had been waiting for a long time, with a round of bullets. Flesh and blood splattered, but this monster still had the ability to leap. It still jumped ferociously from the ground, jumped over Bailan, and threw down an off-road vehicle over there, but its body already at the end of his strength. He slipped slightly and fell from the roof of the car. But after all, this was a monster spawned by the virus. It was extremely ferocious. It immediately raised its head and opened its mouth at the nearest survivor. Big mouth. At this moment, what happened to be standing in front of this monster was Zhu Yiman, the big star of Zhu's pharmaceuticals. Thanks to the leader Qin Chen Xiangxing for the reward, the third leader of this book was born. Thank you all for your support. Thank you. Finally, I would like to ask for a wave of collection and recommendation votes in the early morning. During the new book period, I also hope that everyone will support it. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Chapter 81. Xia Bai, who is obsessed with grabbing food. The extreme mutants came to kill, and Zhu Yiman's expression changed horribly. A security guard in black beside her stepped back unconsciously, panicking. Zhu Yiman's reaction was truly frightened. He held the gun tightly in his hand, but didn't know how to lift it up. In fact, this extreme mutant was at the end of its strength. Most of its body was blown away. It could originally be 5 meters high in one jump, but now it is only more than 1 meter high. The huge mouth it opened even collapsed, and a large amount of it poured out of blood. However, at this moment, heavy gunfire sounded from one side. The bullets seemed to be connected in a string in midair, accurately penetrating into the head of this extreme mutant that was already at the end of its crossbow. The heavy force carried by the dense bullets forcefully hit the head. The monster's head missed and hit the car door on the other side. Superhuman seemed to have truly come to his senses at this moment. He turned around in shock and saw Xia Bai walking towards him step by step with a gun in hand and a heavy gaze. Xia Bai shot a full 20 rounds of 5.5 caliber rifle bullets into the extreme mutant's head. When the monster stopped moving, he stopped firing, stared at the thing, and then exhaled. The tone comes. Superhuman on the other side never expected that at the critical moment, Xia Bai, who had been having some fun before, would save her, but she really broke out in a cold sweat. She also didn't expect that at the critical moment, she would actually look like she stayed where she was like a fool. The person she hired with a heavy sum of money even abandoned her. Instead, she was saved by Xia Bai, a troubled person. This contrast made Superhuman stunned for a moment. Finally this woman bit her red lips, leaned forward slightly, and wanted to say thank you. However Xia Bai didn't seem to see her at all. After confirming that the extreme mutant had been killed, he turned around and walked away. The second half of Superhuman's voice was stupefied, and she stared blankly at Xia Bai's back. Was she so ignored? However, she actually blamed Xia Bai wrongly. Xia Bai really didn't ignore this big star. It was because he didn't notice at all. When Li Jingyang and the others launched rockets, Xia Bai noticed that Sun Zanwu was about to seal the granary full of zombies, and Shuanfeng Town. The zombies over there were also roaring towards them, and Xia Bai couldn't help but feel a little anxious. He had to quickly solve the situation here and go grab food. Therefore, after confirming that the extreme mutant was dead, Xia Bai hurriedly turned around and headed towards the granary. As for the fact that he seemed to have saved someone just now, whatever, it was chaos. Killing the extreme mutant quickly was victory. As for the other things, what stuff is materially important? That's a granary. If you take a cart away, you won't have to worry about it for 2 months. Of course, Superhuman could only stand here blankly like this. This feeling of being ignored was inexplicably more uncomfortable for her than being bitten to death by that monster at this moment. Due to the gunfire erupting here, zombies in the direction of Shuanfeng Town are also surging towards this direction in large numbers. When Xia Bai came over, Sun Zanwu had already opened the door of the second granary. There was no surprise this time. It was full of yellow grain, but it was just a little damp. Sun Zanwu and Xia Bai looked at each other and started moving in unison. Lin Yangan shouted from behind, asking other survivors to come and move food. If it had been before, this situation would undoubtedly have been something Sun Zanwu would never allow. He might have asked Lin Yangan and the others to take away 2 carts of food, but it was impossible for the survivors to come over and plunder. But now the zombies were coming, and there were still 2 warehouses of food. Sun Zanwu asked himself that he couldn't move away. Although he was not a good person, he was not the kind of person who said, I can't take it from others. Don't even think about it, so I'll let it go for now. Zombies are swarming here. Everyone is grabbing the 2 open granaries, as if their buttocks are on fire. They use everything they can to hold food, to load food. Many people have even put down their clothes. They all took off their clothes and filled the bags with food. Some people didn't come to grab food at all. When some survivors went in to grab food, they got into their cars and drove away. The scene became quite chaotic for a while, and some people even wanted to grab Xia Bai. Their RVs all shrank back in front of Chen Shai and Sheng's dark guns. On the other hand, the big star Superhuman and the others are still staying where they are, with no intention of transporting food. Although Xia Bai came out with only 2 people, Baolan, he was more powerful than the dozen or so people on Sun Zanwu's side. This is of course because of the existence of Baolan, the awakened one. This girl can be called a strange woman with extremely powerful power. Sun Zanwu and the others are not as good as Baolan alone. Sun Zanwu was stunned when he saw it and said in shock, Girl, are you the awakened one? Xia Bai didn't have a big appetite, so he just had to fill half of the truck that Hao Zuan was guarding. He covered it with the cloth he had prepared earlier. He raised his head and saw that the first batch of zombies had already appeared at the granary. Fang's men were firing indiscriminately, the sound of bullets tearing through the air and making sharp howls. Some people fled with their lives, some were helpless, and some were frantically grabbing food. The military was firing randomly, but zombies were gradually approaching like a wave. The scene was extremely chaotic for a while. Xia Bai was the first one to evacuate. Sun Zanwu and the others had no intention of leaving yet. Xia Bai loaded a cart of grain with him, so he set the RV and the warship in motion, leading the way out of the granary. Xia Bai and Hao Zuan were together. In the back half, Xia Bai drove, while Hao Zuan was responsible for the zombies that were outflanking them from both sides. It was a good tradition to shoot and run, especially when the Xia Bai battleship was completely exposed once again. He didn't want to deal with those people who were constantly interested in his battleship. As soon as their car started to move, Xia Bai heard someone calling him from behind. He was a little surprised, turned his head, and took a look, and found that the person turned out to be Zhu Yiman. The big star stood behind and shouted, "Xia Bai, are you interested in joining Zhu's pharmaceuticals? I can give you the best development space." The big star stood in the strong wind, with his black hair swaying slightly in the space, as if it were a scene from a movie, with an indescribable and stunning beauty in the apocalypse. But unfortunately, Xia Bai didn't give her any response. In the previous life, Xia Bai would have never dreamed of receiving an invitation from either Zhu's pharmaceuticals or Zhuang Group. With his ability, it would be difficult for him to be a security or defense personnel in a place like this. But in this life, in terms of room for development, of course Xia Bai's own battleship has the greatest room for development. The level of battleships has increased, the scale of facilities has increased, and aliens can be attacked when they come. Can the Zhu group and the Zhuang group be able to? Xia Bai drove the car and drove away without looking back. However, within a moment, he noticed a slightly scorching gaze coming from beside him. He turned his head and saw Hao Zuan staring at him scorchingly, as if there were flowers on Xia Bai's face. Xia Bai was a little strange. "What's wrong, hero? Saves beauty, my heart secretly promises." What the hell? Some kind of hero saving a beauty? Damn it, zombies are coming from your side. Be careful, please. Collect it. Please collect it. For those of you who like this book, I hope you can add it to your collection. It's really important. Thank you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Horobsum. Xia Bai and the others had only driven less than 2 kilometers when they were hit by someone. A black Santana rushed out of the wasteland on one side. It seemed that it wanted to stop Xia Bai and the others, but the driver seemed to be in a panic and crashed into the side of the battleship in front of them. Santana's speed is not slow. If the battleship starts level 2, it will be knocked several meters away. But at this moment, the battleship has been upgraded to level 3, and the outer armor has been completely upgraded. Therefore, the RV is only slightly damaged. With a shock, it moved more than half a meter to one side, and the position where it was hit was slightly distorted. As for the Santana, its bumpers were blown off, and its front end was severely twisted. It was obviously the RV it hit, but it was as miserable as if it had been hit. The system prompt sounded in Xia Bai's mind instantly. "Dear Captain, your battleship has been impacted, and the current damage level is 3%. Hao Zuan was surprised and said, "Aren't you here to touch porcelain?" And over there, another tractor rushed out from the wasteland, with 5 or 6 people standing on it, carrying various long farm tools. When they came here, they all jumped out of the car, and the owner of Santana also got out of the car. That was a man in his 30s, holding a fire axe in his hand. Looking at Santana's miserable condition, he felt somewhat heartbroken, but at this moment he looked towards Xia Bai and the others, looking a little fierce, and said, "Share everyone, get down here. We just grabbed supplies from Shuangfeng town, right? Sorry, your cars and supplies all belong to us now. This Group of people obviously also covets the granary in Xuanfeng town, but they may know the situation there, and they don't dare to take action. They just sit here and wait for the fisherman to profit. However, their cat was a little too far away. From this angle, the direction of the granary could not be seen clearly. I'm afraid they only heard the explosion and saw the light of fire. They had no idea who killed the extreme mutant. Otherwise, they would not have known it. Dare to rob Xia Bai and the others. This group of people don't even have guns. If they come here to snatch Xia Bai, isn't that nonsense? Xia Bai was also straightforward. He pushed the door open and got out of the car, took out the pistol from his waist, and fired 2 shots into the air. The face of the man carrying the fire axe suddenly changed, and he knelt down with a pop. Xia Bai pointed his gun at the group of people and said, "Come on, if you want to survive, drain all the gas out of your car." 10 minutes later, Xia Bai and the others were once again on the road calmly. Thanks to the group of robbers, Xia Bai's AV and half of the car were full of gas, and the half of the car was given to Chen Shai and Cheng to drive. Bai himself returned to the battleship, while the group of unlucky guys could only stay in the wilderness behind, guarding the 2 cars that could drive without gas, and looked at each other. In fact, these oils are actually dispensable, because his primary energy body has just been completed. That thing was smaller than Xia Bai imagined. It was a sphere about half the size of a basketball. Xia Bai studied it for a long time, but couldn't open it. Of course, Xia Bai didn't dare to be too obsessed with opening it. According to the description of the system, this is a pure energy body and may explode. Xia Bai didn't want to blow himself up into the sky, so he simply stuffed this thing into the energy tank of his battleship and completely online it. The moment Xia Bai put the primary energy body in, he heard a system prompt. Primary energy body detected. The primary energy body has been activated. The current default energy solution for warships is chemical fuel. You can change this default option through the system or the battleship's control panel. Xia Bai exhaled and directly commanded the system in his mind to switch to the primary energy body for energy supply. The current default energy plan for warships has been changed. The current default energy solution for battleships is pure energy. There are no external changes to the battleship when the energy source is switched. There is no such thing as a hull burst. At that moment, Xia Bai came directly to the front and gave an order to switch to battleship mode. System prompt: your battleship has been started and the entire system is currently in good condition. System prompt: the anti-gravity engine has been started. System prompt: you are in flight status. System prompt: your current flight altitude 10 meters, 0.20 meters. With the heavy roar of the anti-gravity engine, Xia Bai's AV instantly turned into a battleship, rising from the ground and casting a large shadow. At the back, the group of unlucky guys who had just robbed Xia Bai and the others looked at this side, all dumbfounded. After a while, the leading man carrying a fire axe murmured, "Are we provoking a monster?" But at this moment, Xia Bai was already rising into the sky. His battleship was passing through the sky, casting large shadows and cold light, like a huge creature swimming in the sky. However, here, few people can notice him. Xia Bai wanted to test how far the primary energy body could power the battleship. As this energy body came online, a corresponding energy consumption interface appeared on the battleship operation display in front. Real-time monitoring of energy usage of energy bodies. However, this kind of primary energy body is much more powerful than chemical fuel as a battleship energy source. He roughly calculated that with this amount of loss, if it is in the current pure flight mode, a primary energy body can at least guarantee it takes more than 2 hours for a battleship to travel through the sky. If all functions of the battleship are turned on, this time may be shortened to less than 2 hours. If the more energy consuming electromagnetic shield is turned on, this time may be shortened to half. However, if Xia Bai can build a solar cell system, he can transfer the energy consumption of many equipment in the battleship to the solar cell matrix, allowing the primary energy body to contribute to the navigation of the battleship to a greater extent. Necessary system functions in this way. Once Xia Bai has enough of this primary energy body, coupled with the solar power supply matrix, the energy problem of his battleship will no longer be a problem. Moreover, the energy consumption of the primary energy body is smaller in the form of RV. This thing is bound to become an important energy source necessary for Xia Bai's battleship in the future. If Xia Bai took out these two things before the end, he could even make a fortune and cause a sensation in the academic world. However, at this moment, this thing will be a huge bargaining chip for Xia Bai's battleship to completely gain a foothold in this doomsday. At that moment, he also descended from the sky again, waiting for Chen Shai and Cheng and the others behind him to catch up, and continued to move forward. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Please support. Chapter 83 Beautiful Mountains and Good Waters. U City. Our 37th Armored Division has merged with the 172nd Division, and is now stationed south of Bingcheng at the junction with Ji Province. We provide safety guarantees for all survivors. Amidst the sound of the radio, Xia Bai's battleship was galloping. As they moved forward, Shuangfeng town was completely left behind. Further ahead, there was a wilderness field. Zombies transformed from some wild animals often appeared, but most of them were not big in size. For high-speed driving, for vehicles, the threats are limited. For example, a zombie vol jumped out of the forest with a squeaking sound and hit the window on the side of the car he was driving, creating a crater in the window. But he also bounced out, looking very funny and stupid. The journey was uneventful. They also found a gas station and filled some gas to replenish their supplies. After driving for nearly 3 hours, Xia Bai arrived at his destination. That's U City. This is a city located below Ice City, with an area of approximately 90,000 square kilometers and a population of around 600,000. In fact, when Xia Bai came here, he actually took a detour and went back to the interior of Langjiang Province. This place is the place where Xia Bai stayed in his previous life, a serious feng shui treasure place. In the previous life, Xia Bai came out of the Bingcheng prison survivor base. He originally wanted to go to Ji Province and pass through Ji Province to Liao Province to see if there was a safer survivor base in the military region there, but at that time he was so dizzy that he was chased by the zombies. He suddenly ran off the direction and ran to Zhu City. But this is definitely a good place. There was also a group of military forces here at the beginning. In the first week of the end, a large number of survivors were evacuated. Because the number of troops was not large and they carried too many survivors, they did not join up with the Ice City, but withdrew directly to the Ice City, the direction of Jilao. This is actually the current situation in Langjiang Province. If the scattered troops bring too many survivors, they will be less likely to join the big cities and survivor bases around the big cities, or they will find survivor bases nearby, or advance to the Liao provincial military region. The military wants to divert survivors and establish multiple survivor gathering points throughout the country. This can greatly reduce the pressure on each legion. Just like the 37th Armored Division in Bingcheng. In Bingcheng, after the prison survivor base was lost, they took the initiative to join up with other divisions. Before that, the 172nd Division did not come for reinforcement. On the one hand, there was certainly a communication problem, but on the other hand, the 172nd Division, it is estimated that there are a large number of survivors. If they come to reinforce, they may not be able to fight against the zombies in Bingcheng. Instead, they may lose their wives and lose their troops. For the 37th Division, which is eager to break out from the zombie crowd, 172, it doesn't matter whether they come or not. What matters is whether they can provide support after the 37th Division breaks through. Of course, these things were meaningless to Xia Bai, who had snatched a cart of food and ran away. Now that the battleship had reached level 3, its self-protection capabilities were sufficient. Within a short period of time, Xia Bai no longer sought refuge. The military's plan. Focusing on growth is the way to go right now. Because of the military's retreat, half of the zombies in Zhu City gathered in the direction of Nancheng district, where the military was originally located. The number of zombies in other urban areas was not large, and also because of the early evacuation of survivors. There are a lot of remnants of supplies here, making it the best choice for scattered survivors to settle down. There is a small villa area in the northwest of the city, which is half urban and half suburban. The number of zombies is smaller. Xia Bai plans to settle there and slowly hunt them down during this winter. There are at least 300,000 zombies in this city. For Xia Bai, this is simply a holy place to spawn monsters and upgrade. But without the military, he would not be able to get any more zombies. Weapons and equipment become troublesome again. A full warehouse of 12 solar cells and energy bodies is just around the corner. Xia Bai passed through the outskirts of the city and headed straight towards the villa area. There were indeed not many zombies in this area. During the process, he also passed an old church. Xia Bai remembered that when he came here, he had stayed here. There was a middle-aged survivor who was very enthusiastic about him, but Xia Bai later learned that the middle-aged survivor was raising his wife who turned into a zombie in the church, and Xia Bai almost became his wife's meal. How Zhuang and others always say that Xia Bai has rich experience, but only Xia Bai knows clearly that these experiences of his are all lessons learned by himself. And he cannot have the ability to become a strong man at the end of the day. However, at this moment, the church door was wide open, and the scary couple seemed not to have arrived yet. Their convoy finally drove into the villa area. The villa area in this area was newly built in the past 2 years. Not all of them were even sold, and the various facilities were only complete. Therefore, there were not many people before the apocalypse, and there were not many people after the apocalypse. There are even fewer zombies. When she got here, Baelan became surprisingly excited. She used the intercom to call her to choose a house by herself, quite like an Avorish buying a villa before the apocalypse. How Zhuang wiped his sweat when he heard Baelan's rare excited tone and said, "Sure enough, every woman has a villa dream." Xia Bai Lan finally settled on a villa slightly inside, which had been decorated. The original owners were a family of 3, and they had all turned into zombies. Xia Bai and the others worked in pairs, from inside to outside, up and down. After searching the entire villa without blind spots and killing the zombies, we can finally move in here. Both cars were parked in the backyard, since they planned to stay there for a long time. Hao Zhuang and others were busy carrying all kinds of things in, while Xia Bai arranged fire points in various locations. He sealed all the windows of the entire first floor room, disinfect the entire floor, and ensure that the car is parked so that it can be boarded out. Then search the surrounding area and kill all the zombies in the surrounding buildings. When they have completely subsided, it will be dark. Hao Zhuang pulls out a bottle of 1985 Lafite collected by the original owner of the villa was about to be drunk. In fact, they found quite a few little surprises. Baelan even found a safe. After breaking it open, there was a large amount of cash in it. Everyone felt that they were no different from those who had broken into and robbed the house. In fact, he really beat the original homie Arwana to death. However, in this day and age, $1 million in cash is no different than a wad of papers. Xia Bai is more practical. After he has finished handling the internal defenses, he has been observing the external situation. He plans to embark on the road of hunting zombies starting tomorrow. He can divide it into 3 groups with Hao Zhuang and others. One group will guard the home, and the remaining of the 2 teams. One team and Xia Bai went out to hunt zombies to accumulate energy points crazily, while the other team went out to collect supplies. There were not many survivors in this city, but there were many places that had not been searched. A real treasure point. Of course, their activities and existence will inevitably attract zombies, but their number is not large. It will take a long time for the zombies to gather in groups and they will not be able to stay any longer. During this time, Xia Bai will have to fully use every opportunity to develop and get all the things in the battleship. If you can reach level 4 in one go, with so many things going on, Xia Bai has only one small goal at the moment, to get 12 solar cells to achieve the strategic goal of sustainable development. A book friend pointed out that the area of Zoo City in this chapter has been corrected. 90,000 kilometers is the urban area. Of course, the cities in the article may be prototypes or fictitious. Any similarity is purely coincidental. Any offense is unintentional. Chapter 84 Parker Action. Puff. A gunshot came from a 5.5mm M401 equipped with a silencer. A zombie fell to the ground. Next to the swaying zombie, a shambling zombie suddenly became alarmed. Its head twisted more than 100 degrees strangely, and it rushed towards the direction of the gunfire like crazy. But before it could take 2 steps, another gunshot sounded in the space. A streak of blood exploded from the zombie's forehead, and black rancid blood flowed from it. Immediately afterwards, the zombie fell down suddenly. The body twitched a few times unconsciously, and a large area of thick, dry black blood spread on the ground, and then stopped moving. As time goes by, the zombies on the streets have become less glossy. On a 2-story low building on the other side, Xia Bai lowered his gun and glanced at the sky. Snow was slowly falling in the sky, and a thin layer had even accumulated on the ground. It is November 21st, and the temperature in Langjiang province is gradually dropping. This province, known as the lowest temperature in China, is about to usher in its winter. This was already the 3rd day that Xia Bai and the others came to Zhu City. Xia Bai was standing at the top of a 2-story building in the suburbs of the city at this moment. Just now, he had eliminated the few zombies in the building and killed a few nearby zombies on the roof. This small 2nd floor location is close to Nancheng district. The zombies here are relatively dense, but it is completely opposite from Xia Bai's villa. Moreover, most of the survivors in Zhu City have already been evacuated, and the remaining ones are basically not there. We'll hang out here. Xia Bai exhaled. After confirming the surrounding open environment again, he returned directly along the original road. This supermarket seemed to have been searched by someone a long time ago. There was basically nothing useful for the industry in it. To the north there were even large areas of burn marks, and the whole house seemed empty. However, this was indeed the place Xia Bai was looking for. He took out cans from the RV parked behind and bought them from surrounding restaurants, and other places. The gas canisters were collected and stuffed into this building. In this season, gas, which was once indispensable to every household, has become one of the most useless materials nowadays. However, Xia Bai was of great use to this thing. He placed the cans of gas and installed a small remote-controlled bomb produced on a battleship on a gas can in the corner, before clapping his hands and feeling satisfied. Got in the car at this moment. The 2-story building in front of him was already a dangerous building. Xia Bai, however, didn't seem to have the slightest awareness of creating a dangerous place. He turned around and boarded the battleship behind him, turned the car around, and headed straight for an important zombie gathering spot in Nancheng district that he had previously observed. It was a former nursing home. It seemed that many survivors had gathered here before, surrounded by hundreds of zombies. However, the door of the nursing home had long been squeezed through by zombies. Now, apart from zombies, there were only zombies inside and outside. Xia Bai drove all the way, stopped at the corner, and started playing music to his grandfather using a battleship level speaker. Ha 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 ha. You can't beat me / there's no way I'm just so strong / ha 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 you can't catch me / la 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 / ha 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 you've been defeated by me / everyone come on me together I'm not afraid at all / ha 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 you can't beat me. The crazy demonic sound resounded throughout the nursing home in an instant, and the zombies seemed to have received some kind of inspiration at this moment. They turned around one by one, and then rushed towards this side crazily. Xia Bai closed all the windows, and waited until the first zombie fell on his front windshield like a ghost, before he started to reverse the car after the first zombie. There were densely packed zombies. Xia Bai deliberately stayed for 5 more seconds, waiting for the zombies to emerge one after another, before he completely started to retreat, turn, and rush towards the dangerous building he had prepared. He drove at a slow speed, ensuring that the large group of zombies behind him could keep up. Of course, Xia Bai wasn't too arrogant. After attracting the zombies here, he took the initiative to turn off the music. After all, if Xia Bai couldn't deal with tens of thousands of zombies in Nancheng district, it would be self-defeating. However, despite this, with Xia Bai moving forward, and the howling of the zombies behind him, there were still zombies on both sides being attracted and chasing him crazily. By the time he rushed out of the 2 streets, the zombies behind Xia Bai were already a black tide. Xia Bai looked at the tide of corpses and felt a little scared himself. However, at this moment, he had just turned around a street and was distracted. He suddenly realized that in the middle of the street in front of him, at some point, there was a man carrying a baby on his back. A high school girl with a backpack and glasses. When the female high school student saw this scene, the high-speed rush to her RV and the dense crowd of zombies behind the RV. She was so frightened that she stood there blankly, and her backpack fell to the ground with a clatter. Spill out a bunch of snacks. Xia Bai was startled. He veered away quickly and slowed down the car slightly. The moment he passed this girl, he pushed open his driver's door like lightning and pulled the girl up with one hand. Xia Bai held the opponent's button, pushed the opponent into the passenger seat before closing the door, but almost hit the street light on the other side. Xia Bai turned the steering wheel hard before he stabilized the battleship and continued to move forward. After a while, the dozen or so zombies behind him were about to capture his battleship point in the chaos. Xia Bai seemed to hear someone shouting, but then the shouting was interrupted by the high decibel scream of the female high school student he pulled up, and the howling of zombies outside point. Xia Bai took a breath, and then drove forward at lightning speed, followed by a large wave of corpses. After turning 2 streets away, Xia Bai finally saw his ambush building point. This area has been cleared by Xia Bai, and there are no zombies. Once here, Xia Bai speeds up the car in one breath, shakes off the large number of zombies chasing behind him, and parks the car behind the building. He cleared the outside before the zombies just wanted to hide the battleship behind the building right now. Point at this time, the female high school girl with glasses was still screaming. Xia Bai originally wanted to say something to this girl, but after looking at this guy's appearance, he just shook his head, picked up his rifle and fired. After getting out of the car, he killed a few zombies that were clinging to his battleship like tassel maggots. He rushed to the front of the building. Facing the roaring zombies, he took off his silencer and fired 2 shots into the sky. When the zombies heard the gunfire, they swarmed over. The first one had one of his legs thrown out with the bones, but he still rushed over at an inhuman speed using his hands and feet. Point, please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 85. I did it all. Seeing this, Xia Bai took a deep breath, turned around and rushed into the building. At this moment, he was still more than 10 meters away from the zombie at the front. But just as he turned into the building, the zombie at the front was there. Already rushed to the door. Xia Bai ran all the way to the 2nd floor and then went to the rooftop. He pulled the things he had prepared prematurely to block the entrance to the rooftop and fired randomly into the sky point. But at this moment, the zombies below had actually surged up. The huge number of them opened up most of Xia Bai's blockage at the entrance to the rooftop in just a moment and stretched out their bloody arms as if they were in hell. Seems, in just a short while, the 2nd floor was almost filled with zombies crowding in from outside. And outside, there were hundreds of zombies still going crazy following the sound of gunshots, and the smell of living people are pouring into this building. Point, Xia Bai knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. He took a deep breath, walked to the edge of the rooftop, shot a few zombies blocking his AV, and used the ropes he had prepared here to kill him in one breath. Slided down from above. Point, as soon as he landed, a zombie jumped out from the corner, opened its big mouth and bit directly at Xia Bai. Xia Bai was slightly startled and shook his hand several times, but he missed the zombie. It was critical, but the impact of the bullet knocked the zombie to the ground. Xia Bai broke out in a cold sweat, opened the door, and got in the car. Then without hesitation, turned the front of the car and rushed away. Point, what surprised him was that the girl he picked up by the roadside stopped screaming now and sat there blankly, as if she had lost her soul. Point, but Xia Bai couldn't care about this girl at the moment. He turned around and rushed out. After about 200 meters, he took out the remote control of his remote-controlled bomb and pressed the red button hard. And then, boom, behind him, a ball of fire first appeared in the corner of the dangerous building, and then, the continuous explosions began. Finally, the entire building even turned into a blazing ball of fire. The explosion, the sound was earth-shaking, and correspondingly, Xia Bai's energy points soared upwards like a rocket. Point, Xia Bai drove his car and circled around the building with the powerful power of the battleship, collecting as many energy points as possible. Of course, the battleship would also be affected to a certain extent by an explosion of this scale. Dear Captain, the exterior of your battleship was impacted, and the current damage level of your battleship is 5%. The scale of the explosion was almost as large as that of a missile. Xia Bai estimated that, if he hadn't been in the battleship, he would have lost half his life. Point, when Xia Bai left completely, his energy points had increased by more than 300. In addition to those who were killed on the spot, those who were later burned also provided Xia Bai with a lot of energy points. Collecting energy points in this way is much faster than Xia Bai holding a gun and hunting for positions. 5% of the damage within Xia Bai's estimation and tolerance can be repaired with a dozen energy points. Coupled with the previous 5 energy points of the remote controlled bomb, Xia Bai's sum is absolutely it was about making money with blood. In fact, he had this idea when he was in Bingcheng before. But at that time, the defense coefficient of the second level battleship was too low. If he did this, he might be blown up. The situation in Bingcheng was also different from that of Zhu. Difference it is difficult to effectively hunt zombies and obtain profits in this way. As for Xia Bai's explosion today, he has been preparing for it all morning. Whether it is the control of attracting zombies, the layout and retreat plan here, the detonation plan, or even the distance to the villa area, and whether there are other people around. Xia Bai had considered whether combustibles will cause fires throughout the city, etc., and this led to the current scene. However, although the plan was thorough, in Xia Bai's opinion, it was a bit too thrilling. Of course, this is Xia Bai's first attempt to determine the feasibility. In fact, next time, he plans to use a drone made from a battleship. Now Xia Bai's battleship is the most high-end model that can be built. The drone has special bulletproof outer armor, can fly at a maximum height of 5,000 meters, and has aerial photography and sound functions. However, due to the level of the warship, Xia Bai cannot yet produce military models with weapons and other functions. The reason why it was not used this time was because Xia Bai had made a bunch of high-priced goods, and now his energy points were seriously insufficient. The cost of that drone was as high as 280 energy points. He now collected this wave of zombies before he could use it. Have manufacturing capital. It takes more than 20 hours to build this thing. But next time with this thing, Xia Bai doesn't have to take risks by himself, and the usefulness of this thing is not just that, it may be useful in many ways in the future. So Xia Bai even gave up on getting one first. The plan to come up with solar cells is to build this thing first. Next time he takes action, Xia Bai will be able to enjoy the blessings of technology. With more than 300 energy points at a time, leaving aside the preparation time and rest time required for choosing a location, making arrangements and considering other situations, I can do it at least 2 to 3 times a week, which is nearly 1,000 energy points a week. In a month, when Xia Bai thought about this, he felt like his mouth was watering, and he laughed out loud. Getting rich and reaching the pinnacle of life is just around the corner. Of course, if a month goes by like this, the distribution of zombies in the entire city will have undergone huge changes. The situation may also change by then. Such an explosion may also cause many unexpected consequences. It is unknown. In the apocalypse, the most common accident, the situation may not be as optimistic as Xia Bai thought. As Xia Bai, who has been struggling in the apocalypse for 5 years, he himself is very aware of the suddenness and frequency of unexpected situations in the apocalypse, and he will be prepared for this in advance. However, even so, Xia Bai felt a little selfless and excited. The zombie gathering pattern in Zhu City gave Xia Bai a huge advantage. At this time, he turned his head slightly, but happened to catch the eyes of the screaming girl next to him. The girl looked at the grinning Xia Bai with a look of horror on her face. The two stared at each other silently for a moment, and then the girl with glasses screamed loudly again. Xia Bai. At this time, Xia Bai's walkie-talkie also rang, and Hao Zhuang's nervous voice came from inside. What's wrong? I just heard a big explosion. At this time, the female high school student with glasses suddenly stopped shouting and looked dumb. Xia Bai glanced at her and said very calmly, "It's okay, I did it." For some reason, Hao Zhuang felt relieved when he heard Xia Bai's "I did it," as if in his heart, as long as Xia Bai did it himself, it was not a dangerous thing. On the other hand, the female high school student with glasses didn't know why. After listening for a long time, she opened her mouth again and screamed at a high decibel. On Hao Zhuang's side, there was a sound of snatching, and then Bailan's slightly nervous voice sounded. What's wrong? Who is screaming? Obviously, this awakened girl has misunderstood something. Xia Bai didn't think much and was in a hurry to leave here, so he blurted out, "It's nothing. I did this too. Accident, dear." Book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way Chapter 86 Big Sister. Yi Hanai was a little depressed point before the end. She was a high school student at Chengaiyu Middle School in Zhu City. She had fair skin and delicate facial features, but she was not considered a flower level person in the school because she was the eldest sister in the school. They are just hanging around, and there is a group of sisters who occasionally get into fights. They are the kind of students that ordinary students are afraid of, and teachers are bored by. Point in the eyes of many teachers, this group of girls headed by Yi Hanai caused more trouble than some boys. Yi Hanai's temperament is that kind of wild and carefree. She actually knows that many students and teachers in the school want her to disappear quickly or make some big mistake and be expelled, but she still prefers to stay here. I'm going to hang out until graduation. Point until the end begins. She didn't stay at home that night. She was playing outside with her sisters. Point one of her sister's boyfriends turns into a zombie and chaos ensues. Yi Hanai and her companions found a small private room in a bar and hid there for 2 whole days. The phone signal was out of service and the water and electricity were cut off. When they came out 2 days later, they found that the world was ending and the streets were full of zombies. Yi Hanai awakened her ability at this time and became an awakened person. She first returned home and found that her parents were missing. She didn't know whether they were eaten by zombies or ran away early, so she gathered a group of her sisters. Following the broadcast, I wanted to go to Nancheng district to find the military to follow and evacuate, but at that time Nancheng district was already full of zombies. Although there were many people on Yi Hanai's side, most of them were girls. They were very panicked in the apocalypse, and they could not contact them. The rescuers could only watch helplessly as the military retreated with a large number of survivors who had already gathered their point. There was no other way, so Yi Hanai took the people back to her Chengaiyu Middle School. Point the apocalypse occurred at midnight, and Chengaiyu Middle School was an onboarding school, so the school was surprisingly safe. Point this place is relatively far from Nancheng district. Therefore, Yi Hanai and the others have been hiding for more than a month. They have turned the school into their own fortress, searching for supplies everywhere in the city, which is beyond the reach of adults. Speed and adapt to this world that has undergone tremendous changes. Although Zhu City is quite dangerous right now, this is after all the city where Yi Hanai and the others grew up. They are most familiar with this place. After establishing a firm foothold, they plan to find ways to survive here for a long time and expand the scope of their search for supplies. See if we can turn over the school playground, make a piece of land, plant something in it, and plan for long-term survival in the future. Point and this time, they also found out that there was a seed wholesale store on this side near Nancheng district. Yi Hanai took a huge risk and led a few people all the way from Chengaiyu Middle School, planning to get some edible seeds. The seeds of things come and go back to farm in the school point, but the plan failed to keep up with the change, and they encountered a group of zombies midway. The team was scattered to pieces. Yi Hanai finally found a few people, and then heard a piece of news that stunned her. One of their lone companions was kidnapped. Point it is said to be a luxury car being chased by a wave of corpses. Yi Hanai was shocked. Although she was a social girl who was not liked by teachers and many students in school, it made sense that she was the eldest sister. As long as she was her friend, no matter what happened, no matter what the situation, as long as there was a slight chance, she would not give up on the other party. Point according to her own words, those are her people, and those who follow her are the people she protects. If anything happens, she will take the lead. Point in the first moment, Yi Hanai thought it was some scumbag survivor and wanted to take it out on her sisters. Therefore, Yi Hanai took action immediately. She led her people, drove the van they found, and rushed directly in the direction of the corpse tide. Point however, Yi Hanai and the others were only halfway through, and they didn't even catch the tail of the corpse tide. There was an earth-shattering explosion in front of them. Point the entire ground seemed to shake, and a large blaze of flames shot up in the distance, and then the flames were engulfed by billowing thick smoke. Point to be honest, Yi Hanai was confused. Point everyone in her car was stunned. Point she got out of the car and found a way to get on the roof of a building. She looked in the direction of the explosion and realized that a building over there had exploded and all the zombies nearby were blown up into the sky. Many zombies are even still alive, with broken arms and legs, rolling like burning people. It seems like a scene like hell on earth. Why did a good building explode? Or is it winter? Looking from here, there is no trace of the RV anywhere. It must have been blown up to the sky. Yihanna couldn't help but grit her teeth. In this situation, she couldn't bring anyone over there. Even though there was an explosion there were still a lot of zombies on both sides. If she went over there in such a reckless way, not only would she not be able to find her people, but she might even kill them. Everyone here is involved. Moreover, judging from the extent of the explosion, her companion has probably gone long ago, and even if it passes, it will be meaningless. There was no other way, so Yihanna could only lead her people to turn around and search for seeds. By the time she found the seeds and returned to Chengaiyu Middle School, it was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The snow had stopped long ago, and although the seeds were found, one person died, and the look on everyone's face was somewhat depressed. However, what Yihanna didn't expect was that around 4 o'clock, the RV came to the door and even sent her sister back. Yihanna was taken aback, picked up her favorite flamethrower, and led the others out. However, her sister was intact, but judging from her expression, she was in a state of being frightened and didn't know what to say, while the owner of the RV was an ordinary looking young man. After questioning, Yihanna found out that her sister was rescued by that young man. The other party actually sent her companion back specially, and he did not do anything excessive as Yihanna thought. Yihanna couldn't help being a little surprised. She thanked her first, and then she said suspiciously, "In other words, you were originally being chased by zombies. At the critical moment, when you passed by a building, that building happened to explode, so can you escape and ascend to heaven?" The young man smiled and said very calmly, "It didn't happen to explode, it was me." Ding. Your female channel novel is online, so I don't want you to scold me, so I'll shout. This girl can be considered a semi-important person. Also, as I mentioned before, these zombies are so fierce that they are not that easy to kill. Then continue to ask for favorites and recommendation votes. Chapter 87 Big Wolf Dog. Chapter 87 Big Wolf Dog. Yihanna smiled. She looked up and down at the frail young man in front of her. She didn't believe what Xia Bai said from the bottom of her heart. But looking at Xia Bai's expression, the bloodstains of the zombies still on her body, and the fact that her sister was in such a frightened state as her enemies, this guy's words seemed to have some credibility. Yihanna looked a little suspicious in response to this. Xia Bai just smiled and didn't say anything further. Instead, he said, "This friend of yours was almost killed by me, so I sent her back, just to get to know her, so as not to cause any trouble in the future. Necessary conflict is not good for everyone." After saying such words, Xia Bai turned around and planned to leave. But over there, Yihanna's mouth was half open, looking a little confused. Did she give someone an advance warning and threatened her? If this was before the end of the world, Yihanna would have taken off her shoes and passed away. She had had fights with boys at other schools, and even appeared on the local TV news. But now, she herself has understand the deeper meaning of the other party's words, especially after thinking about today's explosion. Things in the apocalypse are not trivial. If there is a conflict between survivors in the apocalypse, even if 1 or 2 people die, it is not called a conflict. Yihanna was still a little wary. He took a deep breath, adjusted his expression, and said a little stiffly, "Oh, you are worrying too much, but you should pay more attention. There is a big wolf dog going east from Chengaiyu. Don't be too aggressive." After saying beautiful words, he was picked up and eaten. Big wolf dog, however, to the east of Chengaiyu High School is the direction of the villa area, where Xia Bai is located. Xia Bai's heart moved slightly. He waved his hand, said thank you, then turned and left. To be honest, Xia Bai did not expect that he would meet such a group of survivors here. According to his memory, when he came here in the previous life, there were no such groups of survivors in Zhu City. Most of them were just one person. The 2 retail investors, Yihanna and the others, were nowhere to be seen, and they probably had left Zhu City by then. After all, it was only 1 month after the end of the world, and the time was different. If the state in this city was exactly the same as in Xia Bai's memory, it would be considered a ghost point. Although the military here has evacuated a large number of survivors from Zhu City, it is impossible for everyone to evacuate. It is inevitable that there will be survivors here, and it will not be just Yihanyu. And now in the southern half of the city they are all zombies, and most of the survivors should be gathered here. Xia Bai's purpose of sending the screaming little girl back was actually not that simple. He wanted to take this opportunity to find out the location of their survivors' gathering point in case of a conflict. He might as well just kill him directly. As for the hero saving the beauty and giving the girl something. To be honest, from the explosion to now, the bespectacled girl screamed 50% of the time and cried 40% of the time. Xia Bai Guang asked her. Xia Bai asked where his companion lived for a long time. After having an affair with such a girl, Xia Bai felt that he might have nothing to do. As for strike first and kill all these girls, Xia Bai asked himself that he was not that crazy and had no such perverted thoughts through this brief contact. In Xia Bai's opinion, neither the bespectacled girl nor Yihanyu were bad people. The location of Chengai Middle School was directly south of their villa area, and there was a group of survivors living here. It's not a bad thing if there is any abnormal movement of corpses and a large-scale advance here. These high school students will be the first shield to call the police point. But when Xia Bai watched the luxurious extended version RV gradually go away, Yihanyu shook her head. She had the same idea as Xia Bai. She felt that Xia Bai was not a bad person. At least he was not the kind of person who pretended to be, because the apocalypse is coming. So I'm dark and cold-blooded and kill everyone on sight. You guys can talk nice to other survivors. They are the kind of people who use the end of the world as an excuse to find high-sounding excuses for their selfishness and abnormal psychology. Dealing with zombies is tiring, and dealing with people is even more tiring. Yihanyu knows that everyone she meets in the apocalypse will not be as easy to deal with as the bad guys or teachers she met in school, especially Xia. Anyone who dares to drive a luxury car alone through a city like this is a great person. If he makes a move, someone will die. Moreover, in the apocalypse, the survivors really fight among themselves. Hands are usually used to kill them all. Yihanyu is not afraid of fights, but she doesn't want her sisters to die inexplicably in the fights. What's going on if you're killed by someone instead of a zombie? Of course, if someone else touches her and her people, she will never let it go. She glanced at the bespectacled woman behind who was brought back by Xia Bai. The bespectacled girl's face was stained with tears, and her eyes were still misty with tears. I said, don't cry. Yihanyu stretched out her hand, rubbed the bespectacled girl's head, and said, isn't it nothing? That person didn't do anything to you. Didn't he say anything? To tell the truth, tell me what he did to you, and I will help you deal with him. No, he didn't do anything to me. But, that person is a lunatic. He attracts zombies, explodes zombies, and laughs crazily. F***ck. Yihanyu couldn't help but cursed when she heard the bespectacled woman say these words in a slightly trembling tone, thinking, is that guy really a pervert? At this time, the bespectacled woman whispered, Hanyu, am I very useless? If it weren't for me, you would probably have less trouble. What's useless? Although you didn't hang out with us before the end, you belong to the group of good students, but you are different from those bitches who study hard and dislike others, except you. Who else in our class would like to sitting at my table? Are you willing to be my friend and give me lectures? Don't worry, I'll protect you. Besides, think about it, if you hadn't studied well and repaired the generator, would we have electricity now? The bespectacled girl was stunned for a moment, with a rare smile on her face. For a moment, as if she remembered something, she whispered, that wasn't learned in school. It was me and my dad. Okay, it's okay. I found a bottle of Erguo Tao today to give you a boost of courage. But, I won't drink alcohol. Please, collect it. Please vote for recommendation. The author, who is still updating on Valentine's Day, wishes everyone a happy Chinese Valentine's Day. Please ask for a wave of favorites and recommendation votes on Chinese Valentine's Day. Don't forget the herbal tea that you have worked so hard to update. As for the chapter names and so on. But, is anyone reading the novel today? Chapter 88. You should bring that little girl back. When Xia Bai returned to the villa, the sky had completely darkened. He felt that the wolf dog Yihan mentioned might be an extreme mutant. After all, although Yihan side was all girls, there were also many people there. Although the K9 mutant zombies were stronger than ordinary zombies, they were not enough to allow so many survivors. The person is helpless. Zhu City is not that big, and not far to the east of Chengaihu High School is the villa area, where Xia Bai is located. There is an extreme mutant living here, which is definitely a threat to them. Moreover, an extreme mutant has 100 energy points. When the battleship was at level 2, Xia Bai didn't dare to cause trouble with extreme mutants, but now that the battleship is at level 3 and the outer deck has been fully upgraded, he has the capital to hunt such creatures. Moreover, in Zhu City right now, Xia Bai is not shy about showing off his strength. He knew that his large-scale hunting of zombies would definitely attract the attention of many local survivors. Hao Zhuang and the others were searching for supplies everywhere. Some people would choose not to offend them, but there would definitely be people who would cause trouble. Therefore, Xia Bai simply behaved very arrogantly, deterring most people who lacked strength. But that didn't mean there was no danger at all. At least for the first half month, he had to be wary of living people. In the apocalypse, there is no place without danger. When Xia Bai returned to the villa, Chen Qiansheng came up to him and said with a smile, "Brother Xia, I have installed our peripheral warning and warning devices. Anything as big as a palm can be spotted at the entrance of the yard." This set of warning equipment was made by Xia Bai through the system. It was of high quality, but he was too lazy to install it himself, so he passed it all on to the group of people left behind by Chen Qiansheng and others. Xia Bai rubbed his hands and smiled, and said, "It's good. The firepower points set up are ready, right? The keys to those rooms have been taken, and the important supplies are still on the battleship. Where are Hao Zhuang and the others? Have you found the insulation board? There are also induction cookers and electric heaters. We are in the northeast. If there is no heating, we have to find a way to prevent fire, theft, cold, people and zombies." Xia Bai seemed to want to develop this villa into a military fortress. No matter how long they could live here, the defenses had to be built first. After Xia Bai finished asking these questions, Chen Qiansheng said, "Don't worry, it's almost done. Hao Zhuang and I are planning to find time to do the insulation first tomorrow. It snowed today, and it will be even colder. But we don't know how to do this stuff. Brother Xia, can you do it? As for those that use electricity, we are all waiting for the solar cells you mentioned." Xia Bai was convinced that the solar cells could be made in a few hours. It would be enough to directly use them to power the villa. He said, "Let's find a solution together later. Let's take our time." Chen Qiansheng nodded, winked at Xia Bai, and then said, "Brother Xia, what are you doing today?" Xia Bai glanced at this guy. Chen Qiansheng winked and smiled obscenely. "I've heard everything today. I heard that you made a woman cry. Where is that girl? Why didn't you bring it back with you?" Xia Bai, who did you hear these nonsense things from? TSK, TSK, TSK. Hao Zhuang said it all. "I also heard that Sister Bailan thought something had happened to you, so she asked you there." Tell me how embarrassing this Sister Bailan is." Xia Bai, he opened his mouth, but at this moment, what else could he say? He could only enter the house honestly, and find a corner to sit down. To be honest, Xia Bai felt quite embarrassed. Throughout the night, he felt that everyone was looking at him strangely. Everyone seemed to want to say something, but no one said anything. The situation was extremely embarrassing, and he didn't know anything. Yi Zhaoqi noticed something was wrong, and felt that Xia Bai's treatment today seemed a bit bad. She ran over and handed Xia Bai a lollipop, and said with a smile, "I said last time that I wanted to eat candy. Sister Bailan brought it back to me when she went out today. Here, I'll give you one." Before Xia Bai could say anything, Bailan, who was sitting over there, stretched out his hand, pulled Yi Zhaoqi back and said, "Don't give the candy I gave you to others." Yi Zhaoqi was stunned for a moment. She looked at Xia Bai and then at Bailan, looking a little cute. After a while, as if she had figured out something, she ran away. Bailan's expression was very calm. She glanced at Xia Bai and said, "We found a small mineral water distribution point today. No one has touched it. A car can't transport it." Xia Bai said, "I will go there with you tomorrow. There is a bathtub on the second floor. Let's take a good bath." Bai Lang didn't seem to expect that Xia Bai's first thought was to take a shower. She was stunned for a moment and said, "We are obviously living in the apocalypse, but why are we living as if we are fleeing, and you are acting like you are on vacation?" Xia Bai smiled and said, "I'll see if I can install the solar cells tomorrow and connect them to the original water heater here. By then, you can also take a hot bath." Bai Lang glanced at Xia Bai as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she said nothing. But to be honest, she hadn't taken a shower for a long time. At most, she wiped her body with a towel soaked in water. She is a little girl, although she says that bathing wastes water, but from the bottom of her heart, she also wants to take a good hot bath point. But Bai Lang still sighed and said, "Sanghe River is also polluted. What if one day we can't find supplies?" This time, Xia Bai didn't wait for her to finish and interrupted, "Don't worry, if one day we can't find supplies, that's when we can grow our own things and be self-sufficient." Hearing such words, Bai Lang couldn't help but raise his head and glance at Xia Bai beside him. From the moment she met this person until now, every word he said seemed to come true. Escape from the school, go to the Ice City prison survivor base, and even fight your way out of the zombie wave. So, is this also true? Will there really come a day when they no longer have to run around collecting supplies and risking being killed by zombies like they are here now? Bai Lang was slightly stunned. Xia Bai smiled and said, "Then, let's start by taking a hot bath tomorrow." Bai Lang glanced at him and said, "Okay, but who is that little girl today? Don't be irresponsible. You should bring that little girl back." Xia Bai, dear book lovers, please collect, recommend and support me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 New Situation. The next day, Xia Bai used the solar generator he had built. A generator would not be of much use to the battleship, so he simply used it to power the villa first. Although it could not meet the huge demand, it would be of great help in the end of the world. For everyone in the city, having electricity was an unbelievable thing. Hao Zhuang and Li Jingyang even discussed enthusiastically about getting a few computers from an internet cafe in the city and playing Glory of the Republic online here. In this regard, Xia Bai didn't need to speak. Bai Lang said, "You are playing games in the apocalypse and don't want to live anymore." Of course, Hao Zhuang and the others were just joking. Although they seemed to have settled down safely here, didn't they look extremely safe when they were at the Bingcheng prison survivor base? Even the survivors of Ice City prison can be swallowed up by the zombie tide. Their small stronghold is not safe at all. Big problems may occur at any time, especially now. There is no military to help them guard, and they are responsible for all safety issues themselves. Hao Zhuang, although they are big-hearted, they are not that big. If they really get a few computers, although they say they are happy, they will never touch them. Moreover, there are a few living people here. Although the number is not large, zombies are often attracted. Sometimes there are only one or two here and there, and sometimes there are more than a dozen. Following the faint light in the snow, the smell of living people staggered out from the corners of the city, but without exception, they were shot one by Hao Zhuang and the others. Moreover, in order to prevent the smell of blood from attracting more zombies, they had to endure it. Dispose of the corpses of the zombies they killed with the stench rising into the sky. Xia Bai has not been idle these 2 days. While arranging the automatic alarm facilities in the entire villa, he is also preparing for the winter. After a while, the snow will stop, and their movements will be somewhat restricted, and this the problem of keeping warm around him must be solved in advance. In addition, Xia Bai is also seizing the time to produce drones. With this thing, his zombie hunting plan is equivalent to getting a powerful help. And with this thing, He can even better observe the situation in the entire Zhu city and the movements of zombies. After he caused an explosion in Nancheng district last time, the zombies gathered in Nancheng district were all moving. This abnormal movement was different from what Xia Bai had imagined. He originally thought that after an explosion, zombies would gather densely, but in fact, only the place where he detonated the gas tank had a lot of zombies gathered. The flames in the building had long been extinguished, but there are still a large number of zombies wandering on the collapsed half of the building and the charred ground. However, the zombies further away are scattered slightly. Only then did Xia Bai realize that he had been naive in his previous thinking. These zombies were after all non-intelligent creatures. They were driven solely by virus activity and hunger, and used smell and hearing to detect targets. However, this feeling was also limited. Yes, at a nearby location, zombies will be attracted by the loud noise of the explosion, but for the many other densely packed zombies farther away, all over Nancheng district, the sound of the explosion is difficult to judge, but the sound does exist. Yes, they will wander around like headless flies, and even swarm into other urban areas, where there are not many zombies. With these zombies gathered in Nancheng district plus the zombies originally in the city, the zombie branch in Zhu city will become very compact, and the number of zombies here will even increase like a snowball. This means that, if Xia Bai continues to use the previous method to lure zombies to explode, it is very likely that by the time he explodes for a month, the zombie tide will have spread to the villa. By then, let alone winter, they will be gone. Gotta run. There are hundreds of thousands of zombies in Zhu city. Although Xia Bai's battleship is strong, it is not strong enough to compete with hundreds of thousands of zombies. Xia Bai realized that he had taken this for granted. In the game, monsters spawned at fixed positions may get stuck out of their active areas. What's more, in reality, those zombies were spawned by alien viruses. A being with super strength and speed. Of course, zombies must be killed. Xia Bai came to Zhu city, not just to spend the winter. If he really wanted to spend the winter, he might as well go to Shengjing first. The important purpose of his coming here is to seek development. But if you continue to use the previous method to kill zombies, you may have to make new plans, and the zombies in the nearby location must be cleared out as soon as possible. As the drones began to be manufactured, Xia Bai's few energy points were once again running low, and Xia Bai used all the rest to create naval gun shells with 20 energy points each point. Since the battleship was upgraded to level 3, the weapons manufacturing list has been expanded again. Most individual weapons can be manufactured, and the relevant ammunition has also been released. However, further up, the missiles used in the battleship's missile launcher are still unmanufacturable, but naval gun shells can be made. Xia Bai had been rushing to make too many things before, and now he finally had the opportunity to start making this thing. Although the power of naval guns is still not as powerful as missiles, one shot can still clear a small open space among the corpses. Xia Bai felt that he was really confused at the moment and had no energy at all. The current level 3 is enough for Xia Bai. He is not in a hurry to upgrade to level 4. He needs to improve all the internal performance of the battleship and make reserves. Otherwise, even if he upgrades a level 4 battleship, it will be nothing more than it's just an armored vehicle. Meaningless warships are mobile fortresses in space. They are not only invincible and powerful space combat weapons, but also mobile space bases. Weapons and defense systems are very important to warships, but they are not everything. These things can be done slowly. There are hundreds of thousands of zombies in Zhu city. Xia Bai has a winter, and he has powerful battleships. It shouldn't be difficult to get 20,000 or even 30,000 energy points. Xia Bai's top priority now is to quickly get the battleship's hardware facilities up and improve the battleship's overall combat capabilities and even other capabilities. Originally Xia Bai was not so anxious, but the breach of the Bingcheng prison survivor base almost confirmed the emergence of intelligent zombies. Although Xia Bai did not meet him face to face, he has not yet seen the shadow of intelligent zombies. but he also felt a sense of crisis to some extent, and took the time to stop and solve a series of problems with the battleship point. Apart from this, Xia Bai was more concerned about his battleship's medical bay point regardless of whether it is before or after the apocalypse. As long as you are a human being, who can guarantee that you will not get sick or injured, especially in the last days. In Xia Bai's opinion, this medical warehouse was even more useful than a naval gunpoint. Please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way. Chapter 90 Car Thief. Chapter 91 Car Thief. The functions of the medical warehouse are powerful. Judging from the descriptions and treatable items that Xia Bai read before, the third level medical warehouse can handle almost all aspects of the situation, and can even perform independent surgeries. Xia Bai saw that. Come on, this thing is simply a treasure, an artifact of logistical and medical support. Therefore, Xia Bai was particularly interested in this stuff. Today he looked at the detailed map of Yanzhou City and found that there was a very large hospital to the east of the city. He was slightly excited and planned to get something. There is nothing missing in his battleship, but medicines are relatively scarce, and some special medicines are often only available in large hospitals like this. Although the battleship's medical bay can synthesize medicines independently, it also costs energy points. In this world, matter is conserved, and nothing can be created out of thin air. What Xia Bai lacks most now is energy points, medicines and the like. Since he could get it nearby, there was no need for him to spend all his energy points to build it. What's more, his other purpose in coming to Zhu City, besides hunting zombies, is to take this opportunity to collect a large number of these useful and important materials in this city. It is indeed necessary to make a trip to this hospital. Of course, a hospital in a zombie apocalypse is basically similar to a horror movie. If you really want to go there, you need to be mentally prepared. Xia Bai made a plan and briefly talked with Hao Zhuang and the others in the evening, and planned to go there tomorrow to see the surrounding situation before making a decision. After the plan was finalized, Xia Bai returned to his room and went to sleep. The size of this villa is not small, except for a few girls who like to live together. The boys basically share a room. That's it. There are also some empty rooms that can be used to store weapons and supplies. It was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. The sky was dark, and it was snowing again outside. Xia Bai was lying on the bed, thinking about messy things, and fell into a deep sleep. After a while, he also had a dream. He dreamed that he was somehow put on a stretcher and carried into a very strange hospital. There was a little nurse next to him. She was very good looking and wore a nurse uniform with open breasts. A large piece of it was exposed, and a patch of white flowers was exposed. The nurse was chattering something that Xia Bai couldn't hear clearly, and her hands were groping Xia Bai's body again and again, and she was walking in a long corridor full of the smell of disinfectant. The road seemed endless, but the two brothers carrying the stretcher in front and back were not very stable. Xia Bai felt like he was shaking and wanted to vomit. And at this moment, in the direction they came from, behind the empty corridor of the hospital, a sound similar to the ringtone of an intercom suddenly came, which seemed particularly abrupt and irregular. The atmosphere started to get uncomfortable from this point on. At this moment, the nurse suddenly turned her head, looked in the direction of the sound, and rushed the back of her head towards Xia Bai. Not knowing what she saw, she let out a strange and terrifying laugh, and then turned back like lightning. However, in just one moment, the nurse's face underwent earth-shaking changes. The innocent face turned into a rotten face. One eyeball drooped out of the eye socket, and the mouth seemed to have been torn open. Her grin reached to the base of her ears, which contained jagged, bloody teeth. She let out a terrifying howl at Xia Bai and bit down on her head. Xia Bai suddenly woke up from his sleep. He sat up and reached out to touch the row of guns placed on the inside of the bed by the window. But then, he realized that it was a false alarm. Yet the bell still rings. Xia Bai turned around suddenly and realized that it was his walkie-talkie that was ringing. The bell in the dream just now was the one that was ringing. When the bell rang, spring dreams suddenly turned into nightmares. The time now was already past midnight. Xia Bai and the others were in shift vigil mode at night. The intercom rang. It should have been the person on duty downstairs calling him, but now was not the time when Xia Bai should be on duty. Xia Bai frowned slightly and immediately picked up the intercom and said, "Huh." Inside, was Chen Xiansheng's slightly nervous voice. Brother Xia, the alarm outside has gone off. Someone, there are survivors coming towards us. Xia Bai was startled. He immediately got up from the bed, came to the window, looked down, and sure enough he saw a sneaky shadow coming in from outside point, but the man seemed to have been prepared. He entered the courtyard of the villa where they were, and came to Xia Bai's V with a clear purpose. In the dark night, he seemed to squat down in front of Xia Bai's car door, very professional and polite. The familiar one wants to slide the door and pick the lock point. The system prompt immediately sounded in Xia Bai's mind. Dear Captain, there is an unknown person approaching the battleship. The unknown person is armed, and it is recommended to expel him. Dear Captain, this unknown person is performing unknown operations on the warship and has not taken any extreme actions. It is still recommended to expel him immediately. The man seemed to be really trying to use techniques to open the door, and the battleship didn't even set off the alarm point, but Xia Bai knew that it was impossible for this guy to succeed, no matter how skilled he was, because the keyhole in the RV form of his battleship was simply fake. If this person could use a fake hole to open the car door, then it's god. Xia Bai breathed out. Their actions in Zoo City these days were not concealed, and it was normal for them to be targeted by other survivors. After all, in the eyes of the vast majority of survivors, robbing the same kind of people was comparable to killing someone from the mouth of a zombie. It's much easier to do things little by little. He asked, how many are there? Xia Bai and the others transformed the storage room on the first floor into a security room, and the external monitoring and detection equipment were connected to the computers there. Chen Xiansheng replied immediately, 6 or 7. There is a van. I looked at the surveillance outside. Everyone else was hiding outside, and now this one person has come in. Xia Bai frowned and said, I guess they came here to find out the bottom. These people saw our firepower and didn't dare to confront us head on, so they came here in the middle of the night. Chen Xiansheng said, what does Brother Xia mean? They just want to steal the car. Xia Bai silently took out his 09 sniper rifle from a row of weapons in the corner and shook his head. If he really wanted to steal a car, why would there be so many people? Isn't it important to have a large group of people come together to steal something? At this moment, the car thief below had no success, so he started to make other small moves, gesturing to call people outside to come in. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend and support me. Chapter 91. What a tricky idea. The car thief failed to steal the car, so he took out a small infrared toy and scanned a specific location first. The few people hiding outside seemed to have heard the signal and entered one after another in the dark. He entered the villa yard, and the car thief simply took out the gun from his arms and walked towards the villa first in the dark. Apparently he wanted to take advantage of the night to kill all the sleeping survivors in the house. Kill them all. But what he didn't know was that at this moment, the villa in front of him was very lively. Chen Xiansheng was very efficient. When the car thief failed to steal the car, he had already used a walkie-talkie to wake up everyone in the room. At this time, everyone in their message channel lowered their voices. As he spoke, there was a black muzzle sticking out of the window of every room. Chen Xiansheng, this girl is definitely not a car thief. How? Zhuang, they came in with guns. Do you still think they just want to steal the car? Are you the Holy Mother, Li Jingjiang? These people are very agile. Bai Lan, keep your voices down. The people behind you haven't come in yet, so don't startle them. Yang Xin, cautiously, when shall we open fire? Chen Xiansheng, wait for Xia. Damn it, Brother Xia has already opened fire. Xia Bai did open fire. At that time, the leading car thief had arrived downstairs and was about to disappear into the blind spot of Xia Bai's sight. Although not all of the car thief's accomplices had come in yet, he couldn't wait any longer. He is not worried about putting such a person into the villa. If this guy dares to come in, the first person he has to deal with is Bai Lan, the Awakener. But if there is a fight in the house, smashing and bumping, it will be easy. In the past 2 days, the house that had been cleaned up was in chaos again, so Xia Bai directly opened fire upstairs. He used a sniper rifle with a caliber of 12.7mm, and at such a distance, he was shooting from upstairs to downstairs, and he also used a scope, so there was no reason to miss. The car thief was so proud but he didn't even realize what was going on. His head exploded instantly. At the moment of death, he didn't even know he was dead. He fell backwards and fell heavily to the ground behind him. On the ground, there was a large pool of blood in the snow. In the space, the thunderous sound of sniper rifles echoed. Immediately afterwards, a heart-rending shout rang out from the Carthese companions behind him. "Fuck you, sniper." Xia Bai calmly turned the gun and pointed it in the direction of the sound, but before he could fire, someone over there opened fire first. He didn't know who had such good eyesight, and he spotted Xia Bai in an instant. Although the opponents were all armed with pistols, they all seemed to have one. They fired at the same time. Xia Bai had to stop and retreat, and was forced into the room. Xia Bai exhaled. Now that this group of people are here, don't even think about leaving. Their firepower is generally small, and they don't even need to move the battleship. Be simple. The other party's gunshots resounded instantly. Although they were all pistols, 5 or 6 of them fired at the same time, which was quite shocking. But there is no use in forcing Xia Bai back. Because the next moment, Hao Zhuang and the others opened fire. The bang 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 sound of gunfire was instantly replaced by ta-da-da-da. On Hao Zhuang's side, all rifles and submachine guns fired in a burst, suppressing all the survivors. Xia Bai only heard screams coming from below, and then someone yelled at the top of his voice, "Boss, the idea is prickly." As for Xia Bai, there was also a burst of noise in the news channel. "What? Are you shouting from the other side? That guy wants to run away. Fuck him. Should we leave him alive? That man can run faster than my grandson. Fight this grandson with me. Fuck. It's the awakened one. It's the awakened one. No, that person isn't trying to run away. Damn it, what kind of operation is this? Wait for me. Wait for me. Cover me." Xia Bai originally thought that he didn't need to take action anymore, but he didn't expect that the other party seemed to have an awakener. He also changed his color slightly and came to the window again from behind. Then he looked down and saw Jane. He also changed his color slightly. There really was an awakened person among the group of people below. Moreover, at this moment, the awakened person moved a Wuling Hangguang that Xia Bai was familiar with from nowhere. He held it diagonally and used this card domineeringly. As a shield, he protected the people behind him and resisted the shots of Chen Shai and Cheng and others. Moreover, this person was also a ruthless character. Even if the situation reached this point, he still did not intend to retreat at this moment. Instead, he held up the shield. Wuling Hangguang rushed towards this side like crazy. The awakened one was extremely fast and powerful. This thing was like a toy in his hands. It wouldn't take long for him to rush in with this thing on his head. Xia Bai changed color. He once again set up his sniper rifle, intending to find an angle to kill the awakened one. But at this moment, Xia Bai saw out of the corner of his eye that a rocket flew out from the front entrance of their villa. Xia Bai was shocked. The rocket flew out from the front entrance of the villa, and in an instant, it hit the Wuling Hangguang of the awakened people over there. The awakened people seemed to have never expected that Xia Bai and the others not only had sniper rifles, but also rifles. He was able to take out the RPG, but he didn't react and kept rushing forward. Therefore, in the eyes of Xia Bai, who was on the roof, the scene in the field was like a rocket that the awakened person had bumped into. The tick collided instantly, and the van and a group of people behind it were all blown away. The flames rose 3 to 4 meters high, and the entire courtyard of the villa was illuminated. The fire and thick smoke obscured his sight, so Xia Bai carried a spray gun and walked all the way downstairs. When he got downstairs, he saw Hao Zhuang putting down the rocket launcher. Chen Shai and Cheng came out of the control room with a complicated look on his face. He looked at Hao Zhuang with an expression that wanted to both curse and praise. Xia Bai glanced at Hao Zhuang. It was this guy who had just cleared the place. Hao Zhuang was rubbing his shoulders now, as if he was in pain from the shock. Xia Bai said, "Take the gun and follow me out to hit the target." However, at this moment, Bai Lan's voice sounded in the message channel. The awakened one ran away. When Xia Bai rushed out, he saw the awakened person whose arm was blown off, running out of their villa yard while holding onto a door panel, and got into a car they drove over. "Just run away." Hao Zhuang asked, "What should we do?" It would be okay if the person running away was an ordinary person, but this is an awakened person. Xia Bai walked directly to his battleship and said, "I'm a guest. Since I'm here, it is not good to let me leave like this." At that moment, he and Hao Zuan got into the car, notified Beilan, and chased after him. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way. Chapter 92, Dark Night Through the Sky. Although Xia Bai's AV was large in size, it was very powerful and fast. The opponent, a BMW, was caught up little by Xia Bai, who started behind the wheel point, but the other party's speed was also quite fast. He only had one hand left and drove the car steadily. He drove all the way from the villa area to the city. During this period, Hao Zuan picked up the rocket launcher and wanted to shoot this girl again, but was stopped by Xia Bai. Pulling back, there were not many zombies in the previous villa area on the outskirts of the city, but now it has driven into the city. Such a cannon can certainly blow up the awakened person and his car into the sky, but the surrounding zombies will probably be attracted in large numbers, except in the villa area. Xia Bai didn't even think about opening fire. The opponent's BMW couldn't outrun him, so he planned to hit him and knock him over. The two cars were speeding in the dark night of Zoo City, and Xia Bai's car was gradually closing the distance with each other. At this time, Hao Zuang on the other side said, "This guy seems to want to lead us somewhere." Xia Bai also saw this when the other party was in the villa area. He was still driving in a panic, but when he entered the city, he seemed to have thought of something, and the direction began to become clear. Moreover, Xia Bai had already guessed what the other party wanted to do, because the direction that the other party is heading is exactly the direction that the female high school student Yi Hanayu told him about the wolf dog. That thing is probably a powerful extreme mutant. Yi Hanayu knows the existence of that thing, and it is also a local. The awakened survivor knows this as a matter of course. The awakened one obviously planned to use the existence of that extreme mutant to kill himself. This guy still has some brains, but Xia Bai had no intention of retreating. The extreme mutant was so close to the villa area, and Xia Bai had wanted to kill it before. Now that someone with a kind heart was taking the initiative to lead the way, there was no reason for him not to accompany him. The awakened person in front was getting more and more excited. He had a broken hand, his face was pale and sweaty, but now he showed an ecstatic expression. He was indeed leading Xia Bai and the others to a terrifying extreme mutation body, and, in his opinion, these people were stupid enough to be fooled. Just wait for a moment. Wait for a moment. When that extreme mutant comes out, no matter how fast your car goes, no matter how fierce the RPG is, you will all die. At this moment, the awakened man showed an almost crazy smile. He looked at the arrogant RV in the rearview mirror, and the madness in his eyes became more and more intense. These idiots, why don't you just give them everything? It has to get to this point. It has to. The awakened person suddenly turned around while passing through a community in front and rushed all the way to a semi-underground parking garage. At the last moment, the awakened person increased the speed of the car to the fastest speed, pushed the door open and rolled out, watching the BMW rush into the garage in front like a cannonball, and immediately made a loud noise. On the other side, the RV was belatedly arriving, but it was also driving over at a lightning speed. However, at this moment, in the semi-underground garage, an earth-shattering roar suddenly came. A giant wolf-like zombie with a height of 2 meters, a body length of 3 meters, and a scarlet body jumped out. It seemed to be disturbed by the BMW and let out a howling sound that shook the night sky. It immediately focused its attention on top of the RV battleship here, and with the roar, this monster rushed towards the RV here without hesitation. The awakened person over there let out an almost maniacal laugh. In his opinion, the RV and the people in it were dead. This is the fate of those who dare to kill him and kill him. However, in the next moment, the awakened man's smile stiffened. Because right under his gaze, the RV underwent an unimaginable change in that instant. From a car running on the ground, it transformed instantly like a transformer, and suddenly turned into a dark and cold ship. The battleship, exuding an unimaginable sense of technology and heaviness, even lifted off the ground. In an instant, it accelerated to a terrifying high speed that even a sports car could not reach. Without evading it, it ran headlong into the giant wolf-like creature. And what happened next was far beyond the imagination of the awakened man with a broken arm point and the man's stunned eyes. The RV that turned into a black battleship out of thin air hit the body of the extreme mutant head on. Then, it took the body of the giant wolf all the way backwards, taking the body of the giant wolf with it. The huge flesh and blood body slammed into the building on the other side, pressing the extreme mutant's body against the wall. The extreme mutant went crazy, howling crazily, and tearing the front hull of the ship crazily with its huge forelimbs. However, in the midst of the swirling smoke and dust, a turret rose up in the middle of the battleship, and a machine gun with an exaggerated diameter was instantly aimed at the head of the giant wolf-like extreme mutant point. Immediately afterwards, the machine gun aimed at the mutant's head and began to pour out firepower crazily. Within a few seconds, the giant wolf extreme mutant, which the survivors in this area were so frightened that they dared not provoke, was beaten alive by the ferocious firepower of the battleship, and blood was sprayed behind him with every shot. Yes, his body twitched for a moment, then completely collapsed, and became completely motionless at the same moment. In the battleship, Xia Bai looked at the extreme mutant that had completely lost its vitality, and exhaled slightly. Hao Zhuang asked, "Such a big wolf?" Xia Bai glanced at it and said, "It's probably a mutation of some large dog." While he was talking, Xia Bai had picked up his troll again. That group couldn't run far. They already had a broken hand, and they dared to jump out of such a fast car. They are the awakened ones, and now they are half my life is gone. And just as Xia Bai and Hao Zhuang jumped out of the car one after another, preparing to go over and finish the job, under the cover of night, in a corner that no one noticed, a little boy about 6 or 7 years old stood. In the corner on one side of this ruins. The boy seemed very quiet, with half of his body hidden in the shadows, like a ghost, with bloodstains on his face and a dull look in his eyes. After a moment, a piece of flesh on his face suddenly drooped down, and a small piece of dry tape was torn off. Only a broken piece of flesh and blood was connected. The boy raised his hand expressionlessly, pressed the piece of flesh back on, and after silently staring at Xia Bai's back for a moment, he turned around and walked into the shadows behind him. As he turned around, the photo he held in his hand was briefly exposed to the moonlight beyond the shadow. It was a family photo. The faces of the boy's father and mother had been blurred by bloodstains. Only the boy's figure was clear on it. In addition, a golden retriever was lying at the feet of the boy in the photo, vomiting to the world outside the picture. Sticking his tongue, he seemed to be trying to please the world. Dear book lovers who like this book, I hope you will support it and vote for favorites. Thank you for Herbal Tea. Chapter 93. Old. Although this was not the first time he saw a battleship take action, Hao Zhuang was still speechless when looking at this messy scene, feeling like he was in a dream. But he didn't forget what he had to do now. They are going to kill the awakened one. Xia Bai walked in front, while Hao Zhuang was behind, and alerted the surroundings. Many zombies were attracted by the loud noise here. In the world of zombies, there are no territorial laws, even around extreme mutants. There would often be a large number of zombies, so Hao Zhuang would fire sporadically. His marksmanship was not very accurate, but he could still stop the wandering zombies. But at this moment, Xia Bai in front suddenly stopped. Hao Zhuang thought something was wrong, so he immediately turned his gun and looked forward, and saw a group of people approaching in the shadows in front. It's not quite right to call a group of people. It was just 4 people. Hao Zhuang's tactical flashlights clearly illuminated the figures of these people. To be exact, that was 5 people. The person in the lead was wearing a crisp suit and leather shoes, dragging a motionless person in his hand. Behind him, there were 3 people with live ammunition, dressed in the same military style that Hao Zhuang had seen before. The personnel are all different, and I don't know if they are from the military. Hao Zhuang became slightly vigilant. He stood beside Xia Bai, waiting to take action at any time. But until the distance between the people on both sides was reduced to 5 or 6 meters away, no conflict really broke out. The man in the suit, who was leading him, dropped the person he was dragging on the ground in front of Xia Bai. It was the awakened person who had lost his arm just now. He seemed to be breathing, his eyelids were trembling slightly, and his lips were opening and closing. You know, whether you are breathing hard or trying to call for help. This kind of dying without dying is the most painful thing. Xia Bai glanced at it, then raised his head, looked at the suit in front of him, smiled, and said, "Long time no see, Yikazi." At this moment, standing in front of him was Yikazi, the security chief of the Zhuang group, who had offered an olive branch to Xia Bai at the gas station on the highway out of the city. Xia Bai didn't expect to meet this person here, and at this moment, although he was a little strange, he didn't show it. How Zhuang seemed a little surprised. He didn't seem to expect Xia Bai to meet an acquaintance here. When they were at the gas station, Xia Bai and Yikazi talked at the car wall outside. Neither Hao Zhuang nor the others had seen this person before. Yikazi also smiled. "It's not that we haven't seen you for a long time, it's only been more than a month. However, this is an awakened person. He can stand up and run even if he breaks an arm or falls." Xia Bai smiled. The awakened person's vitality was indeed tenacious, but even if the other party ran away, it would be impossible for him to escape from his hands today. However, he still said, "Thank you for your help." When he said this, he changed the topic slightly and said, "Why are you here?" In the previous life, Xia Bai did not remember that Zhu City was so lively. Yikazi laughed, took out a pack of cigarettes from his waist, slowly pulled out one, lit it, took a sip, and then said slowly, "There is a scientific research base behind Shizu Mountain over there. Our group and relevant government departments are jointly developing anti-zombie viruses there." Yikazi said it very happily, which surprised Xia Bai. However, Xia Bai was even more surprised that he didn't know that he actually had a scientific research base here. There were only a few months between when he arrived here in his last life, but the pattern in this city seemed to have changed. A sea change. Instead, Xia Bai felt vaguely uneasy. Seeing that Xia Bai didn't speak, Yikazi blew out a puff of smoke, glanced at the RV over there, and said, "What an incredible thing. Didn't you get this from the military? Originally we didn't want to show up. The research institute is a secret. Yes, we are not military personnel. For safety reasons, we have been monitoring the movements of zombies and survivors in the city. We have limited manpower and have no intention of intervening. But you have been too vocal in the past 2 days. The stuff is too strong, and we are acquaintances, so I just came out to say hello to you." Xia Bai said, "Then I'm quite flattered." Yikazi said, "I don't mean that. I just want to ask if you are interested in joining our Zhuang group now." This time I'm sincere." Xia Bai glanced at the soldiers behind Yikazi who were firing at the surrounding zombies, and said, "I don't want to take the military's car for the time being." Yikazi was stunned for a moment, looked at the RV over there, and seemed to understand something. He smiled and said, "Then I won't force it, but before, my place was still under military control. We survived in Bingcheng prison. They came out when the survivor base was completed. They had been taken care of there, but now, the Bingcheng prison survivor base is gone. They are driven around by zombies everywhere. It is said that they are going to Changbai Mountain. Our survivors, the research will continue, and once they leave, unless there is any new situation or new instructions, we will probably have to stay here." Xia Bai had an impression of this matter. In the previous life, around the first or second year of the apocalypse, a large number of survivor bases in the 3 eastern provinces began to undergo a great migration due to the pressure of the overly large zombie tide outside the base movement. At that time, several groups of survivors and military forces gathered in the Changbai Mountain area, where they built the most famous Changbai Mountain survivor base in the entire northeast. It was the largest survivor base in the entire northeast at that time, gathering a large number of military armaments and high-end weapons, coupled with the natural geographical location of Changbai Mountain. Apart from the harsh local environment, it is almost impossible for zombies to pose a threat to the survivors there. The most famous 13 kings among ordinary survivors at that time also among them. But at that time, Xia Bai was far away from Changbai Mountain. When he wanted to go there, intelligent zombies had begun to appear. There were so many zombies outside the warning circle of the Changbai Mountain survivor base that he could only retreat to the direction of Liao province. And later, around the 4th year of the end, the Changbai Mountain survivor base completely collapsed. It is said that the 13 kings, composed of 13 super powerful awakened people, launched an internal rebellion and wanted to squeeze out the government. The mixed forces of several parties became more and more intense and finally caused a great chaos and gave the intelligent zombies a chance, causing the entire survivor base to collapse. And if the Changbai Mountain survivor base had not collapsed, the Shengjing survivor base would not have grown in strength, let alone become the next target of the zombies from the 3 eastern provinces. Of course, at this moment, these are things that have not happened yet. Thinking about it now, even Xia Bai felt like she was in another world. At this time, Yikisi over there said, "There are many people who want to join our Zihuan group, but there are not many people who refuse us, and refuse us twice. But it doesn't matter, I still have a free. I'm going to provide you with information. Do you want it? Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way." Chapter 94 Snowy Night. Xia Bai came back to his senses and said, "What information, Yi?" Kizzy kicked the awakened one's body on the ground, which was getting colder, and said, "I know where his lair is." Immediately afterwards, Yikisi noticed that Xia Bai's expression was different, and he understood and explained, "We are also the government after all. Although we mainly maintain the normal operation of the scientific research center, we also know a lot about things in Zhu City." Xia Bai said, "Then you are still so kind, Yi." Kizzy said, "I won't tell you, but you have to look for it. Why don't you sell me a favor? Besides, there are some survivors over there who don't have much fighting power. You can take all the supplies, but I want to take those survivors with me." "Walk." Xia Bai glanced at him and said, "What do you want the survivors to do? Protect them?" Yikisi smiled unpredictably, "Lest you kill them all." This man is not telling the truth. Xia Bai had no intention of going into details. He had only had a few contacts with Yikisi for a short period of time, but he had a certain understanding of this person. He knew that even if he asked, the other party might not tell him. Xia Bai just said, "In this city, as long as you don't touch my people, there will be no conflict between us, Yi." Kizzy smiled, then glanced at the RV over there, and said, "That's what I mean too. Otherwise I won't come out today. Just say hello, so we can meet each other in the future. Let's not cause any conflicts, that's it. To make friends." Xia Bai said, "Let me ask more. To what extent has the scientific research center on Shizu Mountain reached the stage of antiviral development?" "Such things don't matter. There are no real secrets at the moment." Yikisi said, "I heard that the progress is not very good. It is said that a section of the virus's gene is similar to the infinite growth of sharks. I heard people say that this kind of zombies will not die on their own after a long time. As long as they have food to eat, they will maintain this semi-immortal state, so they will also be harmful to those of us who can be regarded as food is more of a priority." Xia Bai was also frightened when he heard this. Although he had been living in the apocalypse for more than 5 years in his last life, he had always been a low-level person who struggled and struggled. He really didn't understand these things. The two exchanged some pleasantries. Yikisi's meaning was actually very simple. He didn't want to conflict with Xia Bai. Of course, Xia Bai didn't want to conflict with Yikisi either. The two of them hit it off right away, regardless of what they thought. The chatter on the face was in full swing, and when there were more zombies around, and they had to leave, they took action. As for the materials in the lair of the awakened people, Xia Bai and Yikisi also discussed a plan. Yikisi told Xia Bai the location, and tonight Yikisi's people will go there first, and take away all the survivors there. Xia Bai went over to collect supplies the next day, which was another art of showing sincerity to each other. At that moment, Xia Bai drove his battleship and returned to his villa with Hao Zhuang first. Seeing Xia Bai and the others disappear into the vast snowy night, Yikisi breathed out. Their people wandered around the city every day, avoiding direct contact with other survivors, while also collecting information everywhere. Not only it is information about survivors, zombies and even extreme mutants. Therefore, as Yikisi himself said, they know the situation in this city quite well. Yikisi has actually known about the arrival of Xia Bai and the others for a long time. Tonight Yikisi also learned about the conflict between Xia Bai and the group of awakeners immediately. However, what he didn't expect was that when he rushed over, he saw such a scene. Xia Bai completely crushed them with battleships. With such a posture, he killed the giant wolf-like extreme mutant because he had been staring at the extreme mutant for a long time. It was definitely one of the most powerful mutants in the entire Zoo City, but now it was killed by Xia Bai with thunderous means, and the aircraft. All this is why he stood up. Xia Bai and the others were actually stronger than he imagined. He even felt that Xia Bai and the others were capable of defeating their scientific research center. Therefore, he hurriedly stood up. Come out and say hello to Xia Bai in advance. They are acquaintances after all, so that you can avoid any real big problems later. However, watching Xia Bai and their RV whizzing away, he couldn't help but have the thought if that car was his. But he quickly shook his head and shouted amidst the heavy snow and more zombies around him, "Take that extreme mutant away from me." He thought to himself, if he picked up such a large experimental body and brought it back, wouldn't those researchers treat him as their ancestors? Although he didn't kill this thing by himself, but he was bragging or something. At this moment, Xia Bai was driving through Zoo City at night point. The snow is getting heavier tonight, and the temperature outside is getting colder. The winter in Langjiang province is gradually showing its amazing power. A zombie swinging in the middle of the road was knocked away by Xia Bai, but Xia Bai was slightly distracted. That scientific research center was it because I was alone in my previous life and didn't stay there for too long, so I didn't have any interactions and didn't find out. As they moved forward, they also entered the villa area again. At this time, the impact of the explosion in the villa has been basically cleared up. Bailan, Chen Xiancheng, Li Jingyang and the others are disposing of the corpses outside and strangling the zombies who heard the sound. It is almost over. The snow is falling heavier and heavier, and soon another layer will accumulate on the ground. For zombies, this will greatly reduce the possibility of them detecting humans through their sense of smell. By the time Xia Bai and the others had completely dealt with the situation, the sky had begun to turn slightly white. Xia Bai originally wanted to take a nap in the car because the drone was about to be successfully produced and he could study it on the spot. After all, this was the first time Xia Bai used this thing. But when he returned to the RV parked in the yard, he noticed a person sitting on the edge of the roof of the villa. That's Bailan. She was sitting on the edge of the building in the heavy snow, shaking her legs and looking up at the sky in a daze. Xia Bai hesitated for a moment, but then entered the building, wrapped himself in a cotton padded jacket, and went all the way up to the rooftop. He sat down next to Bailan, glanced at the awakened girl next to him who was still wearing a thin coat, and said, "You is not it cold, Bai?" Lan glanced at him and didn't feel surprised. He smiled and said, "Maybe it's because of the awakened ones. I don't feel too cold now." Xia Bai was stunned for a moment and sighed sourly. The awakened one, dear. Book lovers, please collect and support me. Chapter 95 Drone. As if he heard Xia Bai's sour tone, Bailan glanced at Xia Bai beside him and joked, "You, a guy who drives a battleship to chase awakened people away, will you still envy awakened people like us?" Xia Bai said, "Then I won't get out of the car in case I'm bitten by a zombie. The awakened ones are not afraid of bites." Hearing this, Bailan inexplicably glanced at the wound on his arm that was still bandaged and said, "To be honest, even though many days have passed, I still feel like I'm going to turn into a zombie." Xia Bai looked at the other person's frowning expression and said amusedly, "Is this completely a psychological problem, Bai?" Lan smiled and turned to look at the sky in the distance. It has been snowing heavily for nearly midnight, and there is a faint line of dark red in the sky. After being silent for a while, Bailan suddenly said, "Have you heard of Diomede Island?" "Which Diomede are you talking about?" Xia Bai said, "If you are talking about other literary and artistic cities, I have probably never heard of it, but if it is an inaccessible place like Diomede, then I must know everything about it." Bai Lan asked strangely, "Why? The rules for survival in the doomsday?" Xia Bai replied matter-of-factly, "If you are living in the doomsday, even if you are trapped in a bigger place, you still need to understand these safe havens in the world, where there are no people or zombies. Of course, Diomed is not a holy land. The environment there is too bad. There are no zombies, and there is a lack of external supplies, so people cannot survive. Bai Lan smiled and said, "You sound very experienced. I was actually thinking just now, if we could run from here to the big Diomed island, would we be able to stay away from these zombies and become it safe? But listening to you, this idea is really not a good idea," Xia Bai said. "The reason why there are no zombies in places without zombies is because there are not many people living there before the end. And the reason why there are not many people living there is because that place is not suitable for human survival at all. If a place like Diomed, if they are not killed by zombies, they will probably die of hunger and extreme environment." Bai Lan stretched out her hand and caught a piece of snow. Watching the crystal snowflake slowly melting in her hand, she turned to Xia Bai and smiled. The woman's smile under the brightening night sky has a soul-stirring beauty. Immediately afterwards, Bai Lan clapped his hands, stood up, and said, "No, Master Kuang, no, I'm going back." Hearing such a call, Xia Bai's mouth couldn't help but twitch, but he didn't say anything. When Bai Lan returned to the villa, he still sat here for a while, squinting and looking at the distance. Sky. The night here is surprisingly quiet. Looking at it from this angle, the zombie city in the distance doesn't seem so scary. Instead, it gives people an indescribable sense of peace. Xia Bai also understood why Bai Lan was sitting here. This feeling was indeed good. Xia Bai rarely experienced such peace. Before the apocalypse, he had hardly looked at the sky like this since he was growing up. At that time, having mobile phones and computers and browsing Weibo felt more meaningful than watching the sky scenery. When the apocalypse comes, during those 5 years, Xia Bai struggled all the way to survive. His experience was all summed up little by little during those 5 years of struggle. His petty experience may not be of much use in big things, but it is quite useful in small details. It was not until this life that Xia Bai finally seemed to have such an opportunity. Below is his battleship, his biggest asset for survival at the end of this life, and the villa is a group of people he can trust and can truly be called companions. They may not be that outstanding, but it is because of the existence of this group of people. Xia Bai didn't have to worry about being attacked by other survivors in the middle of the night or having any zombies touch him. There was someone who could help with every little thing and even talk to him. The end is the end, but life is also life. The end of the world may amplify some dark sides, but this does not mean that the world will become absolutely dark. Although the end of the world is the degradation of civilized society. Unless one day the world reaches an ice age and civilization stops, certain things, human nature and culture that have been cultivated for a long time cannot decline so easily. Some people may take extreme measures to survive, but it can't be everyone. Moreover, the military is still there, and the survivor base still maintains the system, so the world cannot really become so absolute. Isn't the wonderful thing about this world that nothing is truly absolute? Xia Bai sat on the roof of the villa until the sun rose at the end of the sky before he stood up and walked downstairs. Bai Lan didn't sleep either and was preparing breakfast for everyone downstairs. Xia Bai saw her and smiled slightly. However, Xia Bai couldn't stay idle. After having breakfast, he came to his battleship and started tinkering with his drone. The drone built by Battleship belongs to the category of war robot. Although its specific functions are no different from ordinary advanced drones, its appearance still inherits the dark and cold style of Battleship. According to the description, this thing also has a layer of external armor, the strength of which is comparable to the armor of second-level battleships. This thing was built, but Xia Bai had no intention of using it himself. He has no skills at all to fly a battleship, so how can he control this thing unless he has 3 heads and 6 arms? Moreover, in Xia Bai's view, the significance of this thing is not only to help him attract large groups of zombies to collect energy points, but also to collect energy points through this thing helps him detect the situation and get certain information in advance. Therefore, Xia Bai only studied this drone by himself, then squatted at the door behind the battleship and RV to see who passed by and catch whom. After last night's battle, everyone except Bai Lan and Xia Bai went to catch up on their sleep. Bai Lan's breakfast had been prepared early, and even the awakened girl had already gone outside to check the fence. but other people are basically not awake yet. However, there is one exception. After Xia Bai squatted for a while, he discovered a strong man, Li Jinggyang. This guy was the only one in the team who woke up so early. He walked out after breakfast and wanted to help Bailan, but was suddenly stopped by Xia Bai, who was standing next to him. Xia Bai called this guy over directly and told him about the functions of this drone. Li Jinggyang was still a little uninterested at first, but as he listened, his eyes lit up and he said, "Let me go, brother Xia, where did you get such a drone? It has too many functions, right?" Xia Bai chuckled twice, and just when he was about to say something, he heard Bailan calling him over there, as if someone was coming. Xia Bai frowned slightly and asked Li Jinggyang to study this thing by himself while he stood up and walked out. A group of survivors came outside, and Xia Bai knew them. Those were the group of high school students from Chengai Middle School next door. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. We are really ordinary survivors. The leader of this group was the girl with the tattoo on her face. Xia Bai remembered that she seemed to be named Jihan. She brought two bad girls over. They drove a smaller electric car, which looked a little funny. They parked it on the other side, but this can be regarded as a model of how everyone has their own way in the apocalypse. But at this moment, the girl was being blocked outside by Bailan, looking a little nervous. When Xia Bai came over, Jihan said, "Your name is Xia Bai, right? Take care of your little brother. He has no manners at all." This guy was as usual, looking like a female gangster, and he was also carrying a fire-breathing device. With the ability of the awakened person, he seemed very relaxed. Bailan frowned. This was the first time she met Jihan, and she was a little bored with the delinquent demeanor of the other party. After all, although Bailan had a cold temperament, she was the kind of person who had been treated as other people's children since she was a child. The top student who grew up as a model of a good child. Xia Bai said, "What are you, Yi?" Hanayu waved her hand and said, "Of course I'm here to express my condolences. We are also neighbors. There was such a big noise last night, so I always came to take a look and help if anything happens." Bai Lan said angrily, "Are you here to pick up the leak?" In Xia Bai's opinion, Bailan definitely hit the nail on the head. If Hanayu really came here to help out of his status as a neighbor, he should have come yesterday. He came here now. It is more likely that he came here to see what the outcome was and whether there was any advantage to be taken. However, it seemed that they didn't have any bad intentions. Their calculation was probably, if everyone on Xia Bai's side is dead, they will see if they can pick up some leftovers or something. Otherwise, if they really came to cause a conflict, it's impossible for just 3 people to come here, and it's impossible to just drive a small electric car over. Now that there's nothing left to pick up, Yi Hanayu's tone directly changed to condolences and help. Yi Hanayu said, "What are you picking up? We are doing it out of kindness." She couldn't finish what she said, because at this moment she suddenly noticed that in the villa yard behind Xia Bai and the others, a small drone suddenly took off and flew from behind like a rocket. Jump up and reach the sky in the blink of an eye. The drone was pitch black and cold. From this angle, it exuded a cold sense of technology and advancement, as if it were a cutting-edge military model. Of course, in fact, the actual condition of this thing was unknown. It's so powerful, but it's just looking cool at most. But Hanayu was a little confused. She thought about the huge explosion that came from here last night and couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" Xia Bai turned to look at it and smiled. "Ha, that's the drone we just got. As for who we are, it doesn't matter. We are just ordinary survivors. Really ordinary survivors." Yi Hanayu looked at Xia Bai in front of her and didn't know what to say. But Xia Bai said, "We appreciate your kindness. We are indeed neighbors. We can communicate well in the future." Yi Hanayu opened her mouth and was a little stunned. She came here originally to show off her ability and strength, but judging from the current situation, it seems that she is better than her at all. Lure zombies to blow up zombies, plus this military drone and the explosion and battle last night. Could this be an ordinary survivor? At this moment, Yi Hanai's thoughts quietly changed. Among other things, she must have a good relationship with this group of ordinary survivors. Yi Hanai has been a school bully for who knows how long, but this is the first time she actively wants to have a good relationship with others. However, before Yi Hanai could think of something to say, Xia Bai over there had already said, well, if nothing happens, I will visit you next time. You see, my drone is ready and ready. I'm going to kill zombies. Xia Bai was talking nonsense. His real idea was to go to the awakened one's home yesterday to move supplies, but Yi Hanai looked at Xia Bai in front of her, thinking about what this man told her 2 days ago about his ambition to kill all the zombies in the city. She didn't believe it at first, but now she surprisingly believed it a little bit. He nodded and said, then I won't bother you. Let's go back first. Immediately afterwards, Xia Bai and Yi Hanai exchanged pleasantries for a while and exchanged extremely standard business blows. Bailan, who was standing by the side, looked at this scene and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he seemed hesitant to speak. In the end, he just raised his forehead, said nothing, turned around and walked inside. Xia Bai pretended to be invisible for a while, then sent Yi Hanai and the others away. The commotion yesterday was not big, but not small either. Many survivors near and far were alarmed. Xia Bai waited for them to get up and then drove the battleship and took everyone to the lair of the unlucky group of survivors who stole the car yesterday. Following the directions given by Yikazuki, Xia Bai searched on the map of Zoo City and soon found the location where the group was hiding, which was not far from where Xia Bai and the others were. The survivors here who were originally with that group were taken away by Yikazuki early last night. When Xia Bai and the others came over, they saw a small group of 2 or 3 survivors here, rummaging around furtively. Apparently, they were also come pick up the missing ones, but when Xia Bai and the others came over, these survivors realized that Xia Bai and the others were the survivors of the villa area, where the original owner had been killed last night. They honestly put down everything in their hands and became very hot with Xia Bai and the others. After a few pleasantries, the meaning was probably similar to that of Yi Hanai, and finally they all left. This group of survivors don't even have guns, so they naturally don't dare to compete with Xia Bai and the others. Moreover, Zoo City has more supplies and there are not many zombies, except in Nancheng district. There is no need to fight with Xia Bai and the others for such a small thing. Conflict. Xia Bai remembered an old saying, the scarcity and adequacy of supplies determine the severity of a conflict. However, everything is going well in the current situation. Xia Bai collected the supplies here and killed this group of people. He has finally established a foothold in Zoo City. Although he does not know how many survivors there are, most of them have survived. But everyone knew about the existence of Xia Bai and his group of ruthless people, and no one dared to pay attention to them anymore. And Xia Bai couldn't really be idle. As soon as the matter here was resolved, he would start upgrading zombies again. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way. As for the typos that everyone has raised recently, I also attach great importance to them and am slowly correcting them, especially those that you helped point out. However, if you have read the modified chapters of Gideon before, you will not be able to see them without reloading. I don't have them. I have turned a deaf ear to everyone's comments. There are indeed typos and inaccuracies. Herbal Tea apologizes to everyone. Moreover, because the author account level is insufficient, I cannot reply to this chapter in the comments area. I can only explain it here. I'm really sorry and hope everyone can understand, and I'm also working hard to upgrade. Chapter 97 Harvest. November 30th, in the southern suburbs of Nancheng district, Zoo City. Xia Bai was hiding with his battleship in a private garage. The garage was now fully enclosed, and the door outside had been lowered. The garage was dark, but the lights inside the RV were brightly lit. Xia Bai was lying on the driver's seat, where he had put down a cigarette, holding a mobile phone charged by a solar battery in his hand, and watching Mad Maximum, looking as comfortable as possible. Beside him, Li Jinggyang was not so comfortable. He was staring nervously at a holographic display screen in front of him. He was holding an operation panel in his hand and was controlling the aircraft named Black by Xia Bai. Eagle 13-inch drone produced by the warship. As for why it is called Black Hawk 13, I'm afraid only Xia Bai, who named it, knows. The drone, controlled by Li Jingyang, was releasing little apples in Nancheng, attracting waves of zombies. This is also a technical job. In order to ensure that it can attract zombies to chase them, the flying height of the drone cannot be too high. If it is not too high, it means that it is likely to be jumped out of midair by zombies in the buildings nearby. Pounds down. Although this drone is called Black Hawk 13, it has no weapon system, so it can only be used for evasion. Therefore, Li Jingyang was already sweating for a while, and he worked hard to kill the surrounding zombies. Attracted to him, he formed a sharp contrast with Xia Bai, who looked like a landlord and a wealthy man next to him. However, the zombies were successfully attracted in the end, along with the dissolute singing of Little Apple, who was gradually approaching here. The zombies' terrifying, continuous roars became clear and could be heard through the garage door. You can hear the crazy roars and the footsteps of the dead people running wildly. Some zombies seemed to smell the breath of Xia Bai and the two living people keenly from the space and turned around and rushed towards the garage, but more zombies were attracted by the drones and the loud singing. Flocked toward a small 2-story building located across from where the garage was. After successfully introducing the zombies into the second floor, Li Jingyang, who was controlling the drone to hover and start to raise the altitude, became excited and shouted, "Brother Xia, it's done." Xia Bai became more energetic. He quickly raised his seat and took out his detonator. After Li Jingyang confirmed that their Black Hawk 13 had successfully risen to a safe height, he directly detonated the remote-controlled bomb that he had prepared. Several tanks of gas had been deflated in the building for a long time. In an instant, the sound of explosions shook the sky above the entire Nancheng district. Through the perspective of the drone, Li Jingyang could clearly see that the entire building and the surrounding zombies instantly it was already trapped in a large ball of flames, and the airwaves even lifted away countless zombies on the periphery. However, the explosion was a kind of attraction to these monsters, and they immediately desperately running or crawling from his position. He rushed towards the flames and explosions like crazy. Nothing better than a moth flying into a flame. Xia Bai's garage was also affected. Even though there was a wall of zombies outside to block it, the main entrance of the garage was also punched with holes by the debris flying out from the explosion. Xia Bai's battleship was also blown out. Several pits came, but this time with defense. The battleship's level of wear and tear was lower than the previous one, only 2%. And then, Xia Bai directly put down the detonator and mobile phone and raised the dilapidated garage. At the same time as he opened the door, he directly controlled his battleship to roar out, knocking away many zombies at the door, and rushed towards the explosion point with fierce momentum. The place had already turned into a hell on earth. The zombies attracted by the drones were bombed to pieces. There was even a barbecue-like smell in the space, and those who rushed into the flames without hesitation now became firemen. Appeared one by one. Under the slightly bleak winter sky, they looked like devils crawling out of the fire purgatory. Even though their bodies were full of flames, they were still fearless of death, and ran around with their teeth and claws, jumped into the flames more crazily, and even came to chase Xia Bai and their RV. Xia Bai drove around the exploding building several times. When his energy points increased by more than 300, he turned around and headed away from here at lightning speed. Li Jingyang controlled the Black Hawk 13 above his head to land on the top of the RV, turned on the drone's absorption and stabilization mode, and firmly fixed it on the RV. As Xia Bai drove away, he ran into a large wave of corpses that had been attracted by the explosion. The corpses were so dense that they covered half the street. Even a tank was here. Faced with such corpses, the tide will be turned over completely, and all the drivers will be held in the car and wait to die. But this was nothing to Xia Bai and his battleship. The moment he collided with the zombie tide, he directly transformed the RV into a battleship, started the anti-gravity engine, and swept over the heads of the dense zombie tide. And then, He landed again on another street with few zombies and drove away from the crime scene in a RV at lightning speed. The reason why Xia Bai left the scene in such a hurry was, of course, because the zombies in Nanchang district were too dense. China has a large population. Provincial capitals like Bingcheng have tens of millions of people. Although Zhu City only has a population of more than 600,000. According to the zombie transformation rate, at least 400,000 people have become zombies, and because of the military he and a large number of survivors were stationed and retreated here. The number of zombies gathered in Nanchang district was the largest in the city, at least more than 200,000. The previous time Xia Bai chose to detonate, he chose the direction inside Nanchang district. The large number of zombies in Nanchang district began to spread into the city, but this time, Xia Bai chose to detonate outside Nanchang district and Zhu City. Detonate at a certain position. In this way, the direction of the sound source is outside the city. Even the zombies who only hear vague sounds will not spread into the city, but will spread outside the city. In this way, the process of redispersing the whole city will be slowed down. However, the corpses are also the densest at this location. Xia Bai has made a big move. If he wants to escape completely, he must be quick. However, this does not mean that Xia Bai can lure all the zombies away and sit back and relax in the villa. This is impossible. Zombies are extremely sensitive to the breath of living people. Perhaps because of external interference and the presence of heavy snow, the speed of finding living people will slow down, but eventually they will definitely swarm into that villa area. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 98 Baby. This is not a joke, it is a fact. The ability of the zombies spawned by this alien virus to find living people is incredible. Ordinary people and a team of ordinary survivors may be able to avoid zombies in a corner of a city for a while, or even find ways to distract the surrounding zombies, but as time goes by, the remaining breath of living people who have lived in the same place for a long time will attract zombies in large numbers. Even zombies that are far away can smell even a little bit of breath, as long as there is enough time. It will also be pursued bit by bit through time. At first, ordinary survivors may be able to resist, but in the end, thousands of zombies swarm over, and it is a dead end. It's not like in the movies, that a few survivors can live for several years without any accidents. Even if you hide in the wilderness for a while, the zombies around you will be attracted to kill and exterminate humans. Which is exactly the meaning of the existence of this virus around the second year of the apocalypse. This characteristic of zombies has become well known to everyone. Few independent survivors and survivor teams dare to build any bases in the city either. Gather into a large survivor base and rely on high walls to block the tide of zombies, or form a convoy and wander around in the apocalyptic world outside. And in the last 4 or 5 years of the end, there were not even many fleets like that, because as time went by, the supplies that could be searched in the city were greatly reduced, and many things were no longer usable, and the probability of being in danger when searching for supplies is also very high, so the survivor base becomes increasingly important. And at that time, the world situation had completely stabilized. Although the situation in the 3 eastern provinces was still not very good, large city-wide survivor bases began to emerge and gather around the world. There are a large number of survivors, and in some places, it is even necessary to start clearing out zombies in a planned manner. Now that Xia Bai thought about it, it was not unreasonable for alien creatures to appear in the 5th year of the apocalypse and officially begin their final extinction activities. At that time, humans began to gather in large groups and began to recover from this zombie apocalypse that was indiscriminately mutating. After this period of time, humans may be able to recover from this zombie apocalypse. But a little earlier, the surviving humans have not really gathered in large groups, and it is difficult to become extinct together. This is indeed true. As soon as aliens appeared, the Earth was basically defeated. It is said that the aliens who invaded the Earth were not at a high level, but they were still not something that the Earthlings could fight against. At that time, China's open magic city survived. Zhejiang was almost the first to bear the brunt. Although the Shengjing survivor base where Xia Bai was located at that time was considered large in scale in the 3 eastern provinces, it was actually not as good as the Changbei mountain survivor base that collapsed due to internal and external troubles. It had no manpower, but no large number of people. highly sophisticated weapons. According to Xia Bai's memory, it was said that on their side, the alien spacecraft only showed a shadow in the clouds. It only attacked once, and then just drove away the zombies, and breached the Shengjing survivor base. Xia Bai had never seen an alien spacecraft, but during the last period of time at the Shengjing survivor base, he heard others say that aliens were like fighting crickets, and zombies were crickets raised by aliens. And human beings are the ones who are fighted to death. And the rest, regardless of the living or dead in the entire earth, seems to be the resources that others want. The thing that Xia Bai regrets most right now is that he didn't risk his life to see what the alien spacecraft looked like, and didn't ask a soldier to ask what kind of impact they would have. Now he is blind. But this is actually not Xia Bai's fault. At that time, the survivor team he was in was appointed to stop the zombies in another direction. He was just a small person at the time. He couldn't deal with the zombies, and it was even less possible for him to want to see any aliens. The spaceships, especially the evil rumors at that time, said that all the people who saw aliens died, so no one knew what their spaceships looked like. It would be amazing if he could think of what could happen in the future. However, because of the characteristics of zombies, Xia Bai and the others cannot stay in Zoo City for too long. They will leave as soon as this winter is over. Before that, Xia Bai had planned to not only save energy reserves and solar cells for the battleship, but also save the capital to upgrade the 4th level battleship point. After leaving Zoo City, Xia Bai still had plans for the next step. He was a reborn person after all, so he couldn't wander around in the apocalypse like he did in his previous life. Although the Bingqing prison was breached by Xia Bai unexpectedly, overall, everything at the moment was basically in line with Xia Bai's plan. At this moment, he and Li Jinggang and killed the zombies here and rushed towards the villa. They solved the matter here, and they also had to work hard for the Zoo City hospital, which was undefeated for a long time. After killing the group of survivors last time and collecting supplies, these days, regardless of whether there are other survivors in the city, they are now becoming more honest and no longer dare to reach out to Xia Bai and the others. At the same moment, in Chengaiyu Middle School, Yi Hanayu, who had been taking a nap, suddenly woke up because of nothing else but the muffled sound from Xia Bai's explosion. Zoo City is not big or small, and the location of the explosion is quite far away from here. It was far away, and the sound came through just as a muffled sound, but Yi Hanayu was still very vigilant. She stood up and hurried to the window to take a look. At this time, the bespectacled woman from before whispered, "Isn't that right, Xia Bai and the others?" Yi Hanayu smacked her lips and said, "These are a bunch of animals. Do you really want to kill all the zombies in the city?" A girl next to me said, "Sister, what should we do? What else can we do? Let's build a good relationship." Yi Hanayu rubbed her chin, pondered for a moment, and said, "Come on, I'm going to go for a walk tonight. Where are the 2 large bottles of lactobacillus yogurt that I collected last time? I'm going to go for a walk tonight." One time, the bespectacled girl was stunned for a moment and whispered, "Hanayu, that the shelf life expires today. Is it really okay to give it away like this?" Yi Hanayu said, "Then it's still not expired, right? Hurry up and return it now, before it's too late. Let me tell you, this thing is a treasure. I can't bear to drink it myself." Girl with glasses, "Who else would drink this except you?" The girl who spoke before said, "Why don't you give me the bottle of 1982 Lafite that I found last time? Come on, just cafe." Yi Hanayu said, "Anyway, it's just to build relationships. Don't ask for anything, just look good, and you treat that bottle like a treasure." "You think I don't know?" The girl muttered something. "Don't you treat the kefir as a treasure?" Chapter 99. Chapter 100. Friends. Zoo City Hospital. This is actually the target that Xia Bai has been paying attention to for a long time. When we were in Ice City, there was a chaos of war and there were zombies everywhere. The hospital in the city was almost a den of corpses, because at the beginning of the apocalypse, even if some people saw zombies biting people, it would be hard to believe that there would really be zombies. When zombies or a doomsday crisis breaks out, hospitals are still the first choice for many people who are bitten. Even if many people realize that the doomsday is coming, they will always rush to the hospital to see if they can get anything that can resist the virus. Something to come point: the population of Ice City is too huge, which directly leads to an outrageous number of zombies in the hospital point. Therefore, when he was in Bingcheng, Xia Bai never thought about going to the hospital point. The building was a place where battleships could not enter. And there were so many zombies that they relied on manpower to search, so the possibility of an accident was too high. Point: when he arrived in Sioux City, Xia Bai inevitably came up with the idea of a hospital. Many drugs and related items were not available in pharmacies outside and could only be obtained from the hospital. Battleships could even perform simple surgeries at the moment. For surgery, Xia Bai needed to get some surgery related things. He couldn't find a supplier in the city, so he had to go to the hospital to find them. Point: but Xia Bai had been planning this plan for several days, but had never been able to execute it successfully. Point: because of a problem, Xia Bai was blocked. Point: at this moment, Xia Bai was sitting in the living room of the villa, looking at the footage captured by the drone. Point: it was taken at a very high altitude. There were not many zombies around the hospital, but the Black Hawk 13 still did not dare to lower the altitude. The reason is actually very simple. Point: in the picture, there is a century-old tree in the courtyard in front of the hospital. It has already entered winter, and heavy snow has accumulated a thin layer on the ground. The tree has long since dried up, but there were more than a dozen or nearly 20 zombie sparrows parked there. They were small in size and had dull eyes. Most of their body hair was dyed red with blood. Some of the injured areas were even obviously rotten. They just stood there blankly withered on the tree pole, in the dead silence. It seemed like a ghost. Point: some people say that this kind of zombie sparrow is the transformation of the undead in the apocalypse, because as such a small animal, after being infected by the virus, the probability of complete death is relatively high, but the probability of becoming a zombie is not high. It is a rare thing, but they are the nightmare of countless survivors in the apocalypse. After turning into zombies, these things are no longer afraid of people, but also crave flesh and blood, and their flying speed becomes faster. Even Xia Bai has difficulty guaranteeing that he can accurately control these things. But they kill faster. Those survivors who drove away in cars on the road were most afraid of this thing. This thing penetrated like an arrow and smashed through the glass. In the cramped space, if this thing could not be killed immediately, everyone in the car would basically be killed to die. Point: if Xia Bai had been huddled in the battleship, of course he would not be afraid of such things, but if he wanted to get out of the car and search the hospital, he had to get rid of the nearly 20 zombie sparrows first. Point: Xia Bai had never seen so many zombie sparrows in the past 5 years. Not only Xia Bai was dealing with it, but Hao Zhuang and others were also thinking about it. At this moment, everyone was lying down together and watching the aerial video. Chen Shai and Sheng said, "How about we just send the drone to play songs to lure them away?" Xia Bai shook his head, but before he could speak, Hao Zhuang over there said, "You don't want the drone. This thing can fly faster than the fighter jet." Our Black Hawk 13 flew over and circled around without waiting. "Speed up and run away. We are probably going to be shot down by these sparrows. With such a huge drone, we might as well just hit a missile. After the missile passes, these stupid zombie sparrows probably think they are some living people. Now that it's here, you might as well hit it up yourself." Chen Shai and Cheng was not to be outdone. "Do you want to use missiles to hit sparrows? In fact, there are many ways to kill zombie sparrows, but it is difficult to reduce the losses. The drones cannot be dispensed with, and the 3 remaining Thunder 8s on the battleship cannot be used to fight sparrows." Xia Bai had a slight headache. He couldn't lure the sparrow with a battleship because it flew extremely fast. Xia Bai couldn't turn on the battleship mode and use the anti-gravity engine to move forward at full speed and rush out for several kilometers just to get rid of this sparrow. A group of sparrows. They were discussing here, and suddenly a voice from one side said, "Where is the fire?" Everyone turned their heads. She unexpectedly saw Yang Xin, who was in the monitoring room, coming over at some point. She glanced at the zombie sparrow in the picture and said, "What I mean is, get a remote controlled toy car and tie it to a flammable object. Drive it under the tree and light it. These zombie sparrows can't avoid fire at all, and they can't feel the heat, so won't they all burn to death?" Everyone looked at each other. After a while, Chen Shai and Ching murmured, "Where can I go to assemble the toy car?" Yang. Zin's face turned slightly red and she said, "Last time, I picked up a toy car from the Zoo City Mall." "How?" Zhuang said, "Did we think too complicated before?" Xia Bai shook his head and smiled, and at this time, Yang Zin said, "Well, there is a person outside our villa, standing under the monitor we arranged. It turns out that this girl came here for this matter." Xia Bai clapped his hands, stood up, and first went to the monitoring room to take a look. He actually knew that person. It was Yikazi, the security chief of the Zhuang group. This guy is still wearing that ridiculously stiff suit, dressed like a successful person in the apocalypse, but it still doesn't make people feel ridiculous and out of place. At the moment, he is holding a cigarette in one hand and carrying a living thing in the other. Chicken, standing under the surveillance camera, smiled at the monitor. The person in charge of security actually looked a bit gentle. This guy seems to be here alone. What is he here for? Xia Bai went out and met this guy outside the yard. Yikazi blew out the smoke and said with a smile, "The position of your camera is quite hidden, but it is too amateurish. I will ask my people to teach you later." Xia Bai said, "That's a good feeling, but you guys are doing so much all day long. How can I sit still?" Yikazi laughed, seeming to be talking about Xia Bai's bombing of zombies today. "So, I just came here to walk around and make friends. Everyone said that in the apocalypse the most useless thing is friends and interpersonal relationships, but I don't think much about it. Before the apocalypse, you have to rely on friends to do anything. After the apocalypse, wherever you go, you will have fun. If you have many friends, only fools kill people all day long. Smart people know how to make friends. Are you right? Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Please support me in any way. I have noticed that some book friends have recently responded that this section is relatively dull. I will pay attention to it. These chapters are mainly about transition. The transition will be over within this week and will soon enter the next big stage. However, this is plain and stable development. Chapter 100 Little Sister, do you want to eat chicken? Chapter 101, Young Lady, do you want to eat chicken? Even in the doomsday, even if he has a group of armed forces in his hands, Yikazi still behaves like a successful person. Xia Bai knew that in ordinary places, the position of security chief was a nice name for security captain, but in an enterprise like Zhuang Group, the concept of security chief was much bigger. Seeing that Xia Bai didn't say anything, Yikazi continued, "However, counting the previous time, plus today's time, the killing of zombies is not small." When Yikazi mentioned this level, Xia Bai completely understood. This guy was also a little confused by his rumbling explosion in the past 2 days, so he came over. Yikazi did come to find out what Xia Bai wanted to do. To be honest, there were tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of zombies in Zoo City. Yikazi was confused, and then he ran over to see what kind of condition Xia Bai was in. Could he be the kind of explosion maniac in the doomsday? Xia Bai really didn't have to explain this matter. He smiled and said, "If we want this end of the world to end, don't we have to kill the zombies one by one?" Xia Bai's implication is, "I have a great ambition, which is to wipe out all the zombies on the earth, starting from one zombie at a time." Yikazi glanced at Xia Bai and said with a doubtful smile, "This is really." He held it here for about 2 seconds and probably didn't know how to round it out, then said, "So, you will it continue to explode in the future?" Xia Bai nodded very simply and said, "Absolutely, roughly the same." Yikazi thought for a moment and suddenly felt a little frightened. He thought for a moment and then said, "But, I still have to remind you that our biological research institute is on Shizu Mountain behind. Although it is semi-underground, when you, explode zombies, pay more attention and care." Xia Bai said very calmly, "Don't worry, I will mainly bomb here in Nancheng district." To be honest, it has been nearly 3 months since the end of the world. Yikazi asked himself that he had seen a lot of all kinds of people in the end of the world. This was the first time for him to see people like Xia Bai who had finally managed to live in peace, but rolled up his sleeves and went around blasting zombies because he thought a little absurdly. This may be the kind of terrorist mentality awakening at the end of the world. He exhaled, picked up the chicken in his hand, and said, "This is from our research institute over there. It is not infected. It was originally intended to be used as experimental receptors, but it would be inappropriate to just take one out and eat it." Question: before the end of the world, a live chicken like Yikazi would not be able to give it away at all, but in the current doomsday, such a live chicken is worth more than anything else. Xia Bai was also very proud. He took the chicken and said, "Just in time, we still have beef in the refrigerator. You can have a bite at my place today." Xia Bai actually had the same idea as Yikazi of establishing a good relationship. The Xian group was a major force in the 3 eastern provinces in the apocalypse. Although it had always been invisible, in Xia Bai's memory, they were among the survivors of Changbei Mountain. The base and the survivor base in Shengjing are a very powerful group of people. Not only do they have military backgrounds, but they also control several important resources. It is said that, even if it is the end of the world, they still have production lines in operation, with a steady supply produce some important materials at that moment. Xia Bai and Yikazi walked side by side into the villa. Yikazi and Xia Bai talked a lot about the situation in the Biological Research Institute. As he said before, it is the end of the world now. What are the research progress and results? In his opinion, it's not a secret, it's all something that can be said. But just as Xia Bai expected, Shizushin's Biological Research Center has been studying this virus for a long time, but still has not come up with any results. It has not found a way to resist this virus, and even its characteristics have not been found. There is no clear research, but according to Yikazi, this thing also has mutant viruses, and is also changing. Yikazi even said, "To be honest, the development of this antiviral drug is not optimistic. I heard Director Zhang tell me that this thing may not even be on the Earth, or it may follow a meteorite belt that fell in from space. Our Earth has become a breeding ground for the viruses that have come in," and he also said that this thing has the possibility of mutating many times, and even if a serum is developed, there may be nothing we can do against the virus variants. Zhejiang Group actually attaches great importance to this biological research center and has invested a lot of resources and manpower here. However, the situation is not optimistic. As large companies, they also want to end this catastrophe more than anyone else. Yikazi was left by Xia Bai to finish the meal, and was also shocked, because Xia Bai had not only beef, but also all kinds of other rare things in the apocalypse. There were so many dishes on the table, that he could even catch up. A pre-apocalyptic meal, and they were only halfway through eating, when another uninvited guest came to the door. It was Zihanayu, who came with 2 bottles of yogurt. Her purpose of coming was essentially the same as Yikazi, and she was bombarded by Xia Bai all day long. Boom. I was so frightened that I came over to see the situation. Xia Bai's eyes lit up when he saw the 2 bottles of yogurt, and he greeted very enthusiastically, "Miss, do you want to eat chicken?" Hanayu. After this meal, Xia Bai and the others have become completely close to Hanayu and Yikazi. Not only are you fighting over each other among the survivors in the apocalypse, but this kind of peaceful coexistence is also common. Only fools kill every day. The next day, Xia Bai was not idle. He set off directly with Hao Zhuang and others. He first lit the dead tree in front of the hospital, and burned the zombie sparrows to pieces, and then poured into the Zhu city behind. Inside the hospital, the contents began to be swept away. There were a lot of zombies in the hospital, most of them gathered at the main entrance. Xia Bai and the others concentrated their firepower, and swept through them, then entered the hospital in pairs. The zombies in the hospital were even more bizarre, and some of the original patients, even huge sarcomas appeared on the body, which were extremely bloody and terrifying. There were also those little nurses, naked, shielded, exposing large areas of purple-black skin, showing off the weirdness and horror of a hospital in the apocalypse. Xia Bai even saw a fat zombie blocking the entire corridor. He picked up his spray gun, advanced instead of retreating, and hit the zombie's head with his head. Immediately afterwards, the huge zombie slowly fell backwards and crashed onto the ground. The whole building seemed to shake. Li Jingjiang, who was behind Xia Bai, moved forward with a gun point. Xia Bai suddenly turned around and glanced into the cold corridor behind him. He didn't know if it was an illusion. Just now, he suddenly felt as if something was watching him from behind. However, the corridor was empty. Was there anyone there? However, Hao Zhuang and his group were in danger. They encountered more than 30 child zombies gathered together on the 3rd floor. Xia Bai carried a flamethrower and swept them away to eliminate the risk. Everything went smoothly next. However, when evacuating the hospital, perhaps because of the dead tree outside that had not yet burned dry, the number of zombies gathered far exceeded Xia Bai's imagination. But of course it was impossible to stop Xia Bai. The battleship roared into the sky and flew away in the blink of an eye. What he didn't notice was that as his battleship left the field, on the rooftop of the hospital, there was a little boy watching his battleship go away blankly. The little boy stared blankly at Xia Bai's battleship disappearing into the distance, and then looked at the crowd of zombies on the ground with a very obviously confused expression. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. I'm asking for all kinds of support while being cute. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.